So now I'm not gonna talk about Vegas.
Was that Brandon?
No, Christopher. He's over all the operation. I don't work on the construction side anymore.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I have a construction business, I don't work on the. I'm married with construction. The only thing I have there is Chad's business partner.
Yeah.
But not
Well,
through that.
hey,
That's it.
everybody,
Hey, Trev.
I wanted to apologize that I won't be there. I appreciate you letting me join by the phone. It saves me a lot of hours of sleep. So thank you very much.
I think you did the volume.
We're gonna turn you up here.
Oh, I'm free.
Is this yours or somebody else's? No.
Yeah, no, the partner did, Chad McAwee, who was one of my partners. We own a real estate development company, construction company, we do under interior design. We do wholesale furnishings for project flooring, club operations for events and then club roadway. And then we do and vertically integrated materials. Yeah. We don't do them all every time, but we got a 3 full-time interior designers. They're great. And then great construction team. What do we call them? That's a good question. We still call it Natalie Development. But people get confused because it's called Natalie Development. We use it locally and it doesn't move the name. They don't say, oh yeah, it's a construction company. You need to rebrand the name. So we call Natalie Development, Natalie Interiors, Natalie Communities. But they're not the only, they're all split between ownership, but not the state. But doing good. They're doing good work over at Boston Street.
Have you seen that? The train's great.
I've ridden the lift.
That's more than I got.
It is steep. You skied it? WPR? No? No, I will though. I'll go over and. I tried to watch the work session for the CW, Rick. I don't know if Gage called you on this or not. But I tried to watch the work session. Sometimes I upload to YouTube. I couldn't find it.
On the planning one or the
County
county?
Commission work session. Because I've dug, I watched every single video
Yeah.
from the beginning of time on the CW basin up until the work session. I just didn't know how it went.
It was there, I saw.
Okay, so you can fill us in and tell us how it went. Because that's the only thing, I studied CW stuff because I was, you guys know, I called many of you on this.
Yeah.
And I had my thoughts, but I just felt like I didn't get to see the last one, what the commissioners had decided in that work session. So maybe when we get there, you can fill at least me in. Maybe you guys are all filled in, but I'm not filled in.
I can just tell you right now that there wasn't any conclusion reached. That was Commissioner Proer who said, I think twice, that it needed to go back to this commission. And there was there's discussion back and forth. They brought up the topic of airspace units, which doesn't exist anywhere in Weber County Code or certainly in anything related.
Have we formally started this?
No, we should. Sorry.
Let's formally start this
Okay.
before we.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to have a formal, I was trying to
Yeah.
you want to try to find the video.
Yeah, we should probably put this on record.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Are we waiting for Charlie or you staff?
they'll be coming, but we can start talking about this. They're on their way.
You ready? Sure.
Yeah. I couldn't hear what Trevor was saying. I think he said, because he's not here tonight, he's buying us all dinner or something.
That's for sure what I heard. Thanks for dinner, Trevor.
Anyway, let's get started. Welcome, new commissioners, Joe
Postenbaugh.
Postenbaugh.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a mouthful, but it's pretty much pronounced the way it's written.
Postenbaugh.
Yeah.
And Mark Whitty.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And Commissioner Barber's here, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Burton, and let's get going. Okay.
Commissioner Schuman's online.
Pardon?
Just for the record, Commissioner Schuman's online.
Oh, Commissioner Schuman is online, so we have 6 of the 7 commissioners. Commissioner Wagner may come tonight.
Yeah. Haven't heard otherwise.
All right. So go through the agenda. We have we got some minutes. We had a chance to look at the minutes.
Yeah.
And heartburn with the minutes. So
I was hoping Commissioner Wampler was gonna do it, because she does such a good job, but I did go through them. She's always so good.
yeah, that's a lot of words in those minutes.
Right.
We have a consent item tonight. Director Grobel, what's that gonna be?
This is just a reuse, using the existing facility and adding to it. So we just put on common consent. We didn't see any major issues with it, but you guys see any issues with it as you've read the report or have concerns with it?
Is there an existing structure there now?
There is one structure, they're proposing another structure there.
Did we clean up the code base? I think CMU is not allowed, but split base was. Did the code get cleaned up to allow for this?
Yeah, so we're okay with that. We did, just because of the nature of it, whenever you're dealing with a public utility substation, that's what it falls under, so it falls under conditional use permit. So that's why you're looking at it. Typically on something this small, you're like, well, why am I even looking at this? But that's why.
Commissioner Wagner, welcome.
Nice to see you.
We just got started here. Did you have any corrections or on the minutes?
Just one very silly spelling mistake, which I can just, discuss. Oh, page 5, first paragraph, last line. It's just somebody was typing quickly. Top A. Yeah, I think it's 2 though, but that's it.
Good.
Other than that,
Probably AI.
anything?
Other than that, you're happy with it?
I'm good. Minutes are good for me. Thank you.
And we're just talking about this consent item. Rebuilding of a pump station, essentially what it is. Okay, no questions on that? We have an administrative item. Request for approval of conditional use permit for 7 recreation lodges located in the 5 zone. This is up South Fort Canyon. It looks like it's just to the east of Tampa up there, on the south side of the road. Tammy is going to help us with that.
So I'm not, when this application first came in September of 2022, I think the county, every department had some concerns with some existing conditions on site, as well as things that would need to be addressed prior to getting this before you. So just so you're aware, This has been with our office for the last year and 5 months, as they have worked closely with planning, with code enforcement, with Weber County Engineering, Weber Fire, and Weber Morgan Health to get to a point to where we can each issue a conditional approval. And for those that are new to the Planning Commission, conditional uses are those uses that are permitted in the zones with some conditions applied to it. Generally speaking, if there are any concerns or anything that can be mitigated through additional conditions, typically these are approved by the Planning Commission. However, I appreciate all those of you that have reached out, asked questions, wanted to know kind of what was going on and where things were with a couple of these. So this is on a piece of property that's about 35 acres in the Forest 5 zone. Okay, recreation lodges are a conditional use there. I do want to point out, because the applicant is proposing 7 recreation lodges, that there is nothing in our ordinance that outlines the maximum number of recreation lodges they can propose. Okay, they're proposing 7 of these with 16 sleeping rooms each. They're proposing 184 parking spaces. They are proposing a restaurant as part of this, a 50-seat restaurant for use by those that are staying in those sleeping rooms. They're proposing amenities like cross-country and biking trails, a pickleball court, a swimming pool, a clubhouse, some horseshoe pits, which are some of the requirements for a recreation lodge, is to have some year-round amenities that they can use on site. So that's what's being proposed. I will tell you that I sent out, Commissioner Barber expressed some concerns, and so we don't always include all of the reviews from the various agencies. It can be sometimes time consuming to go through those. And typically when we recommend approval, we do recommend approval condition upon meeting every review agency requirement. However, just in an effort to make you more aware of everything that we've looked at, I had those sent out via email. So hopefully everyone received those and had a chance to look at those last week. As you can see, the health department has got a long list of items that they feel need to be addressed. Code enforcement has weighed in, Weber Fire District, Weber County Engineering. They've all touched on the bridge. They've talked about the wastewater system, the need to implement a public drinking water system. Just so you're aware, because health department, they're not always aware of our processes with regards to conditional use permits. We don't issue the actual conditional use permit until they have crossed every single T and dotted every I, period. They can't move forward to applying for a building permit until they have received their conditional use permit. And then they can't move forward from there to get a business license so they can operate this until they have met all of building code requirements. And when they submit building permits, the planning department weighs in, county engineering weighs in, health department will weigh in, building inspection will weigh in, fire district will weigh in again at that point in the process. So I wanted to just kind of make you aware that we look at this several times before they are to a point where they're actually operating. Does that help allay some concerns anyway?
Operating, but also whether they get we can approve the conditional use, but they can't actually have it until they have completed all of the.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
So of that whole list of concerns from various departments, including the wastewater, from your perspective, is there one or two that is of significant concern right now?
I think I would say from a planning perspective, and Rick may want to correct me, I think really the wastewater issue is probably the biggest one, is making sure that they meet Weber Morgan Health Department's requirements.
And that's getting kicked up to another level though, because of the size, right?
Right, yeah, it would be I think they labeled it a public underground wastewater disposal system.
Same with their culinary water as well.
Same with culinary water.
So for the waste, so to the level it's being kicked up to, are there any others in the valley right now at that level besides maybe the schools?
Are you aware of any truly public? So we've had a few applications come through where the initial proposals required that, and then I feel like for a lot of them, the proposal has been kind of scaled back a little bit to avoid having to go through that process, because then they have to go to the state
Right.
to get their approvals.
I didn't hear the question.
Are there any other underground wastewater disposal systems in the valley at that level? That this one is, besides maybe the schools or those are government?
We've got one in Crimson Ridge, I believe, that serves quite a few homes there, but I don't know if it's the same technology that they'd be using. These guys are kind of close to the river, so they may have to do some kind of advanced media treatment system.
Like really, like right on the river?
Yeah.
Boom, right there.
Yeah, and they do have a setback requirement from the health department that they would have to meet, but
Mhm.
and I'm not sure exactly what kind of technology the health department's going to require them.
So if anyone from the public comes tonight to speak on this, are they going to be allowed to? Given that this is an administrative?
Typically, we don't on administrative items. They meet the ordinance, And in this situation, they've been working with the health department for a year and a half to try to get this done, and health departments came back, giving us these requirements. My gut feel is they've still got a lot to do before they can actually satisfy them.
And I don't even remember how I know, but when I saw that they had been cited for dumping raw sewage in the river, somehow I knew that already. Someone had told me there were issues or problems up there.
Our code enforcement has been working with them for many years to get that site cleaned up.
Being that it's an administrative item, are we not allowed to take any of that into, I mean, I would think we can't take any of that into account, like whether they have repeatedly been cited or they've been asked to make these improvements, the improvements have not been made. Yet they're wanting to move forward with getting the approval, and yet.
I think we could put a condition that code enforcement also, right?
You definitely
We
could.
could say that, we could put a condition on there saying that code enforcement also gives an opinion to sign off, right? Because it's a CUP, we're, by law, we're supposed to approve it if it's taking the all impact, so.
Right.
And to your point, right, but if we can then go and say, okay, but we want code enforcement to also.
Is that the same bridge that the fire department said had to be upgraded, or that bridge that you're talking about?
The fire department has mentioned the bridge, engineers have mentioned the bridge, health department has mentioned the bridge to be up to a standard that would allow for heavy equipment to cross for installation of this septic system, of this wastewater system, I guess.
80,000 pounds is that's typical.
That's typical for, yep.
That's typical what we call heavy equipment, right?
Right.
And the wastewater is being delivered across the river. Is it being tunneled under? Is it being?
I haven't seen the engineered plans, and I don't know that he has submitted exact plans for it yet. The intent of some of these is to allow them to move forward without having to go over their head money-wise into these before they even have any approvals, right? And so.
I have done this type of system right on the Weaver River up above Ogden. That's usually the way they discharge. There's a way to get through with the state that they're safe, the waterway. So I know how hard it sounds, and I've done them. It's not easy, but you can do something and have it be right there on the, like literally right next to the river. I've done them. And they're safe and they test, so.
My concern is that Weaver River South Fork's been kind of posted as a secondary or option for more water for Ogden Valley. And this, the surface water. And I don't know if that's a conflict of where they're supposed to draw that from. It's streamer down.
So the health department, though they don't oversee these public systems, they are very familiar with the technology used, and they've indicated that it's feasible to do this. But they've also outlined a whole bunch of steps they've got to hit before they can get to that point.
And then outlining that, are they and the state agencies absolutely familiar with this area and know that it does flood?
The health department definitely is.
Yes.
Yeah, we've talked to Summer and she's aware of that. That's why it's been taking over a year to get this
Summer
to
is
the stage.
very thorough, like, very thorough.
Amen.
That's like, the thing is, like, if Summer's, that, when I read this and I saw that and I saw that Summer did it, I was like, okay, like, I've worked with Summer, she is, from the developer side, very thorough. Like, you
That's-
spend a lot of extra money.
So
For sure.
from our perspective as a planning commission, we have to look at three things in a CUP: health, safety, and welfare. And if those three have been addressed in our conditions, it's approved. Is that correct?
Well, there's a few other things, but those are part of it, yes. If it's satisfying those, then you're obligated to approve it. You're not the health department expert, you're not the water expert. You guys don't have those hats. If the fire department and the engineering and the health and the water have come back and said, yes, it's feasible with these conditions, you're obligated to approve it, based upon what they've said.
This is Cortland. I would say that that is a simple overview of kind of the umbrella categories that everything would fall within, but there are a lot of factors that the planning commission and the planning division can consider. Ultimately, the planning commission can make the decision based on whether or not those negative impacts can be mitigated, and that is anything listed in section 108-4-5 of the code, which is pretty lengthy actually. And to get back to one of the questions earlier, there is a section that talks about providing reclamation, restoration, cleanup, or beautification of the site as the use evolves or as the use is terminated in order to mitigate aesthetic and nuisance effects. I mean, that's kind of looking down the road. But there are a lot of things here that can be considered, and just make sure those can be mitigated so the effects are not too negative on surrounding properties and on the public.
In addition to
So
that, the code
Cortland-
says substantial evidence. So as to put restrictions or conditions on one of these conditional use permits, you've got to have evidence that there is a problem that you're trying to mitigate, not just a speculation that there's a problem you're trying to mitigate.
Yeah. And where we've reached out to the health department and they've given us that information, I'm not sure if you have sufficient justification to come in and go contrary to what the health department's recommended.
So Cortland, you mentioned one thing that I want to clarify. You said that we have to determine if those things have been met. And I think there's a differentiation there. We don't determine if they can mitigate the risk. The health department does, or the water department, or everybody else. We just say if they determine this is okay. Is that correct? Because I mean, I'm not going to be able to know if they can mitigate the risk or not.
That would be what you would have to consider in making your decision. Yeah, that probably came out wrong. You would defer to the health department's interpretation, of course, because they're the experts, but you have to look at whether or not these factors in the ordinance are things that there is credible evidence that they either can or cannot be mitigated, and that the plan that has been proposed to you either does address their mitigation or doesn't address their mitigation. But yes, it would be right for you to defer to the health department on matters that they actually have jurisdiction over.
Likewise, engineering, everybody else.
Yeah, engineering, fire, district, yeah.
Would it be appropriate to potentially give an approval, but with the stipulation that if a hookup to a centralized waste treatment system were available or reasonably available at the time they commenced construction, that would be, they'd be obligated to do that versus this underground system of their own.
It's already part of the law, the state law.
They have,
If they're within 300 feet. So if you guys want to put a stipulation that's longer than 300
Yeah,
feet.
that's what I'm suggesting, that it's,
It was in the road, it would.
if it's, and I don't know what the length would be, but I mean, to me, that is a significant system being put in by folks we know have not maintained in the past. And so if there is a better system available, I would think for something of that magnitude, they should be obligated to hook into it.
The question I have, there was a comment that they haven't maintained in the past, or they've been cited, and I'm not aware of the issues that have happened in the past, where they've had problems there.
they must have cleared that up because that never came up with our code enforcement. So
That's where,
There were some things that Tammy sent, some, different, like the health department sent something to you and
Their
then you forwarded it
reviews.
on.
Yeah.
And if you read through them all, there was some stuff in there about things that they've been repeatedly asked to remove from the property that they have not done. The bridge is still unstable, this water dump thing, there was quite a few things where I'm reading going, really? Like, but that, the way I understand it, that's for the health department and everybody else to get after. We are bound by, is it within, the ordinance and this and that, but it is a little, concerning
If the health
to
department,
give an approval to somebody that's like, well,
yeah, those things, if the health department's indicated it, those things, that could definitely be, part of your recommendation.
if any of those items are in the zoning code that the health department has asked them to mitigate or remediate and they haven't, then we have an obligation to not give the permit until they've remediated. We have a section of code that says no land use permit will be issued if there's an outstanding zoning violation on
But isn't
any
that-
parcel.
Isn't that the part of like, we could approve it tonight, they don't get it until they meet all those things, so it doesn't really, that's what that is.
Yep.
Yeah,
You got it.
just because we approve it doesn't mean you get it.
It's kind of compartmentalized. Code enforcement runs their own show. They have penalties, they have timelines, they have the law that supports their function. You could add a condition if the code allows it, to the effect that the permit can't be issued as long as they're in non-compliance. If they're in compliance, no problem. If court on that say, is that permissible?
Conditions.
I think it's already written into the code that way, but
Or are we interfering with code enforcement?
Like specifically as mentioned, go and inspect, because if it's not on their list of to-dos.
you're looking where it says that, Courtney.
Where's the code enforcement? I mean, there's one way it's 7.6.
It's 102.
Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying, we could condition it upon them being in compliance, currently in compliance with. Code.
Right, so what I'm asking is, does that mean, like, for example,
I wouldn't,
Rick was saying, code didn't say anything about them, or does that make code go inspect?
124.
no, I think it's between that. If there is current enforcement action against the property owner.
1242C.
For violations on the property, and that's ongoing. This can't be issued until those are cleared
Oh,
up.
yeah.
I think that would be
It has to
good.
go through inspection to make sure that they do.
So if you, I mean, putting it in as a condition of approval would just be giving the applicant a little bit of due notice. But their ordinance already says, no application for permits or approvals governed by this land use code shall be approved for any lot or parcel until all unresolved zoning, subdivision, building, business license, nuisance, or other violations on the lot or parcel or on any parcel included in a manner as part of the application are resolved, unless approval of the application will resolve all the existing violations.
That makes sense.
So it's there.
So
And just so you're aware, code enforcement has been working very closely with the health department and helping to mitigate these. What I think some of you saw was in the health department's review that was forwarded to you was a statement that what is labeled on the site plan as a caretaker's cottage has been disposing of their their wastewater directly into the river. The health department has issued an order to vacate. They don't want anyone using that property until it is tied in to their proposed system or whatever ends up being the wastewater system on site for all of this. So that might be what you saw, Commissioner Walter.
It did have to do
Okay.
with an existing structure, yes.
Right.
Okay.
But it goes to care
All
in
right.
my mind.
We got one other item, big item tonight, and it's the legislative item dealing with CW land and the issue of the existing or non-existing development rights. We've gone over this multiple times. We got 2 minutes to get in and get started, so unless there's something we ought to know in this meeting.
I've got a different version of a development agreement that I'm gonna hand out to you based on some comments that Chair and Vice Chair gave in our Chair and Vice Chair meeting. Good comments. So I'll hand that out to you. I've highlighted the changes, so it'll be easy to flip through and see, and I'll just tell you what they are. in
You
my
mean if we
presentation.
were to vote to make amendments to the development agreement, that's what you're talking about?
Yes, if you vote to make amendments to it, yeah, it's not obligated to.
Okay, and just quickly in 10 seconds, the discussion we're talking about is road improvements and whether, as part of this development agreement, would include the obligation of CW to put in all the road improvements.
Yep, that's it. So we've got a new paragraph in the version that I'll hand out to you that ties TDRs to the road improvements. So if you guys do want to go that way, that's available.
And it's, the applicant has agreed to that.
Not yet. So we got the applicant right here, and we'd have to talk with them
Okay,
specifically to make sure they're okay with it.
okay. All right.
As far as I know, no. So this is my first meeting too, so. Yeah, there's name tags down there. I think that's.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is a regular meeting of the Ogden Valley Planning Commission. Let's begin with a pledge of allegiance. If you repeat the pledge after me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll have a roll call. I am Jeff Burton. I'm the vice chair, but Trevor Schuman, the chair, is on the road. He'll be joining us by Zoom. We have present tonight all of the commissioners. We have two new commissioners, Joe Postenbaugh and Mark Schweppe. Welcome. And Commissioner Johnson to my left, Commissioner Wampner, Commissioner Barber. On the agenda tonight, we have minutes from, looks like three meetings, 11/14, 2023, 12/19, 2023, and 1/11, 2024.
I just have the spelling change on page 5 that we discussed in the pre-meeting. First paragraph, page 5.
Okay, so that's some typos in
That's it.
first paragraph, page 5. Having heard no other changes, amendments, we'll consider those minutes approved. And were there any conflicts of interest, ex parte communications anyone would like to disclose? Thank you. We have the second item is rules of order. Portland, our legal counsel, would you explain what we're doing there?
Yes, the rules of order that govern the Planning Commission's internal operations and your operations at these meetings are presented to you just to review and approve each year. And so that is what this is about. I don't believe there have been any significant revisions, probably no revisions at all that I'm aware of, since maybe springtime of last year.
Okay. So understanding there are no revisions, do any of the commissioners have any comments on the rules of order? Any proposed changes? I'll entertain a motion to approve the rules of order as they presently exist.
I'll make a motion to approve the rules of order as they currently exist.
Have a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. There are none opposed, so that passes unanimously. Next item is a consent item, 2.1 CUP 2023-16, a request for approval of a conditional use permit for a reuse pump station located at 4350 North, 4450 East, Eden. Director Grover, what are we just?
This is typically something you just approve under one motion, either to approve it with conditions, or if you want to pull it and discuss it, we can do that.
Okay. The presenter is Marta Borchert.
Typically, we don't have staff present on consent items unless you have questions and you want to pull it from the.
Any questions on this consent item?
Chair Burton, I'd make a motion to approve the consent items.
Hold on, Commissioner Schuman. We can't hear you. They're fixing the audio. Commissioner Schuman, you want to give us an audio
I
check
motion
again?
to approve to the consent items.
We got you now.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent items. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, Commissioner Wampner seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. The next item is an administrative item. This is CUP 2022-14, request for approval of a conditional use permit for 7 recreation lodges located in the F5 zone at approximately 10909 East Highway 39, Huntsville. Planner Tammy is
Oh, I thought you were
ready
going
to
to attempt to
present it to
pronounce
us.
my last name there. Let's see here. Thank you, commissioners. Pull up the presentation here. I may do a bit of reading from the staff report. This one's got a lot of information I feel is relevant for you to consider with this application. So bear with me here. As previously stated, this is located in the Forest 5 zone at approximately 10909 East Highway 39 on a 35-acre parcel. The applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use for 7 recreation lodges. Now, a recreation lodge is a conditional use in the F5 zone with a maximum allowance of up to 16 sleeping rooms. And the applicant is proposing 7 recreation lodges with 16 sleeping rooms each. As part of this conditional review and as part of the application process, it is a requirement to be able to provide on-site amenities for what we term a recreation lodge. And so the applicant in their site plan and in their narrative has indicated being able to provide things like biking trails, cross-country skiing, pickleball, swimming pool, various amenities that will be available to those utilizing the recreation lodges. Applicant, I want to make sure that I mention this as well. The applicant is also proposing a 50-seat restaurant on site. Planning would permit this or allow this, or per our ordinance rather, would be allowed strictly for those that are using the sleeping rooms in the recreation lodge. As you can see here, this is an aerial, and I want to kind of point out, you've got the river that runs right through the middle of this property. This river has a 100-foot setback that engineering has asked to be shown on their site plan. As you can see, most of the structures are shown outside of this. There are a couple of existing structures that, as long as the footprint of these structures does not change and the use doesn't change significantly, that engineering may allow this to remain. Now, these structures, just so you're aware, still have to meet current building code standards prior to any type of occupancy or use. In fact, any structure on site that will have any humans in it at all will have to meet building code requirements. So you will see a couple of these structures within that floodplain, or within that setback rather, and the associated floodplain actually, but engineering is okay with them remaining there as long as they come up to certain standards as they go through this. These are just a few of the standards to consider. Again, this is located in the F5 zone. It's a conditional use. There is nothing in our ordinance, by the way, that limits the number of recreation lodges that can exist on a parcel. Okay. Applicant is proposing 184 parking spaces. That's what's shown on their site plan. One thing I want to point out is our code does not outline or set standards, parking standards, specific to recreation lodges. Hotels, for example, require 1 parking space per 2 sleeping rooms. They are providing more than 1 per sleeping room. These are some of the amenities the applicant is proposing. One of the other things that we look at under the conditional use standards are landscaping standards. The applicant is proposing to clear minimal area. If you look at their site plan, I'm going to go back to their site plan. The applicant is trying to consolidate the development in one area using as much of the already cleared area as possible so that further clearing is minimal. They are looking to use the existing landscaping trees on site to provide screening and buffering from Highway 39 and from adjacent uses. This is what they're proposing as their landscaping plan. Let me point out a couple of things on this site plan. They're a little bit small to read, and I'm not sure how easy they are to read in your staff report. These are your 7 lodges here, each with 16 sleeping rooms, surrounded by parking, approximately 5 feet of landscaping immediately around each building. This is their 20-foot setback, minimum of 5 feet of landscaping around their parking area as well. This is their proposed restaurant. It's not shown on here, but there is an existing, what they're calling a caretaker cottage that is shown here. Just to orient you, let me see if I can go back to a map. I can hear questions behind me wondering where this is. Bear with me. I'll pull this up on GeoGizmo real quick here. Get a better idea as to where this is located. Yes. Okay. Everyone see this map okay? Let me zoom in a little bit here. This is the parcel here. That helps everyone. Go back to this presentation here.
So Tammy, could you confirm the parcel? Is it one parcel, or will part of it or the waste treatment be on a different parcel?
Oh, of course. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. I think it's easier to zoom into GeoGizmo here. So the proposed area for their treatment system, and this will be a public treatment system that will go through the state of Utah for their standards. However, Weber Morgan Health will oversee the installation of this. First of all, when you enter in off of Highway 39, there is a bridge here that crosses the river. The bridge has come up in several county reviews, and so that will need to be addressed by the applicant to make sure that every county agency is satisfied with what they're proposing as far as the engineering of that bridge. This area here on this side of the river is proposed for their underground septic or wastewater system. Now again, Weber Morgan Health Department has indicated it's feasible, but they would have to go through the state. They'd have to meet a list of standards. And we can go through that a little bit later as far as what's issued when regarding this conditional use permit. But this would be the area here for their underground wastewater treatment system. I do want to point out that their culinary water will be provided by a well. They have yet to drill the well. And I believe the applicant is here, by the way. If you have questions for him at some point, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer those. Does that answer your question about the wastewater system? Well, so these all have the same parcel. These two have the same parcel number because they're cut by the river, but yes, it is separated by the river. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You mentioned the well, and then it
Mhm.
says they have to have fire sprinklers in each of those 7 buildings.
Yes.
Okay, is somewhere, I assume someone's looking to verify that that well is enough to satisfy in the event of a fire.
Yes. Weber Fire District, they have their own standards for how much water must be contained on site. And they're working with the applicant to establish those. They've already gone through some basic numbers and have issued to the developer what they would need minimally on site. In addition to what they're holding on site, they need to make sure that there are sprinklers in every building.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. These are just some comments from some of the county review agencies. Some of the departments that do review this are Weber County Planning, and under Weber County Planning, Code Enforcement has uploaded a couple of their own reviews for this. Weber County Engineering, they review this project as well as Weber Morgan Health Department. I want to make mention in the minutes that we have had this application in since September of 2022. The applicant has worked arduously with each of these departments to get them enough information to deem this a feasible project so that we can issue conditional approval. One thing I want to mention about conditional use permits is that the permit itself is not issued until every single condition of every single department has been met. And then once that conditional use permit has been issued, then they can apply for building permits. And the same departments look at those building permit applications as well. These are some of the standards in our general plan that talk about performance and general land use code, recreation goals of parks. One thing I do want to mention regarding this particular application is that Weber County Engineering has required a traffic study. 116 sleeping rooms is a lot of traffic coming into one entrance. Weber Fire District has expressed a desire to see a plan for a secondary entrance, and I believe the applicant is working on that now. But Weber County Engineering has requested that they get a traffic study done and that any modifications to their access be approved by UDOT ultimately.
I just want to clarify. So in our findings or conditions on whether or not we approve this conditional use, we don't need to worry about any specification of impact fee for the road or turning or anything like that, because that will just be worked out with UDOT in order to get their approval so that they can in fact utilize the conditional use. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we don't need to worry about that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's all that I have. You've got staff's recommendation with associated conditions in the staff report. Do you have any questions for me at this time?
I have just a couple of little questions. You mentioned that they're going to have trails and different amenities for their lodge guests. Are they existing trails or are they putting them in?
They are putting in one trail here. You see a loop trail.
Is that trail also open to the public? I know that we've been, with the general plan, we're supposed to look for any new development to be increasing connectivity and adding trails, pathways, different amenities for Valley residents as well. Is this open to the public or just lodge residents?
You know, planning has not actually made that requirement where it's its own kind of self-contained loop trail. It doesn't connect to the greater trail system. We haven't made that requirement that it be public. And I'm not sure if Rick or Charlie have any other comments to that effect. Charlie may, I don't know. He usually does.
I have just one other question, and it just has to do with the number of parking spaces. I know that the ordinance doesn't have a requirement when it comes to this particular use, the recreational lodge, but I'm pleased with the number that they're suggesting. I'm wondering that if we don't, I'm wondering if this were to be approved, are they held to that number, or do we, in order to hold them to that type of number, rather than letting them all of a sudden just kind of rewrite it, do we have to stipulate that it's that number that we're also approving?
Typically, with the conditional uses that I have experience with, when a site plan is submitted and we ask how many trees, we ask how many parking spaces, unless that's modified by the planning commission, that goes into their approval and that's what they're held to.
Okay, thank you.
I have 3 questions. In the discussion of the water system, it was stated that it has to become a public water system, which requires a body politic to have jurisdiction. Could you tell us, in this case, what that body politic might entail?
Yes, I just wanted to pull up a letter from the Division of Drinking Water. And if you'll allow me, I just want to read this brief letter from one of their environmental engineers. It says the Division of Drinking Water understands that the Ruby water system that will serve this development will construct a new water system, including a new culinary well, storage tank, and all necessary appurtenances to provide safe drinking water to the patrons of the development. The existing problematic spring source and storage system will be entirely physically disconnected from the culinary system. And although this is not a formal approval of the new system, the division has no concerns with the proposed plan as presented. We haven't gotten as far as discussing the body politic. I know that county engineering is a little reserved in taking on the proposed sewer system. However, I'm not sure how much leeway the county has in saying no. I'm not sure, Rick. Do you have more information about that?
They just have to go through the process that we typically go through for creating that body politic. Unfortunately, we have a lot of water systems throughout the county. It's not something we like to have, but under the current regulations, we have them. And if they chose to go through that process, they could. There's a legal process through the state that they have to meet in order to do that.
So what's the range of body politic that, since that is a requirement, what's the range could exist for them to then good to go?
I'm not sure what you mean by range.
So it said, wherever I read that, it said there has to be a body politic oversee or have,
Like, how does that get set up?
well, no.
Or
If
I think I could jump in here, possibly to get to your question. The county could do it, or a district could either take it over if it's an existing district that has jurisdiction over that area, or a new district could be formed.
So they could form their own district, is that true?
If they went through the right process, yes. If they met all the legal requirements for that.
Next question is the traffic study. I'm familiar with that area, and the traffic runs the range from absolutely none to almost backed up with trailers and campers and big vehicles. So when would, and how does the UDOT go about a traffic study in a situation like that, where there are times of the year where that road is really busy and other times where it isn't?
That's probably a question better directed towards our county engineers, unless Rick has additional information about traffic studies.
yeah, typically they will hire their own firm to do a traffic study, and then what we'll do is our engineering department will look at it, and they'll get with UDOT and review that, and they'll determine if it's feasible or if it's not feasible.
And the third question is, I saw on the rendering no trailer parking spaces, or what I could determine are trailer parking spaces. Are those just vehicle spaces, or I would imagine large vehicles with trailers will come in there?
I have not had much. I'm looking at their most updated plan. I'm not seeing trailer parking on here per se, and the applicant may want to address that
It
actually.
would be horrible if trailers ended up parking along that road.
I agree.
You good? I just have a question, just making sure you're okay. So probably more questions for the applicant, or more actually lessons learned. But I wanted to check with you, Tammy. Have we talked about snow removal? And I know we talked about refuse a little bit. I have life experiences making mistakes on the site plan, so I just thought, have we talked about those things?
We haven't talked about snow removal or showing those easements on there, not at this point yet.
So I would just say a couple things from my own lessons learned. Is I would just figure it out, right? I don't know if the applicant, which one is the applicant, but more address the applicant. Then two, I would work with the refuse plan to actually get circulation. They care about how they turn around in these. So if it's not on the site plan, those trucks can't get in there. They can't turn around. So identifying, I get this as an earlier concept plan, that's fine. But just for the applicant to identify those can locations, because waste management won't get in, and they have to have perfect turnarounds. Like, they will not get out of their trucks. So just identifying those spots so that you don't deal with snow storage in places and then you lose. Now you were at 184 spots and now you're at 100, right? And so identifying those is, I've made that mistake, so I'm just trying to help them not make that mistake.
Thank you.
Tammy, on the lower, like 8 o'clock on this diagram, there's a little, looks like a road going out to the northwest. What is that?
I believe that is currently their proposed emergency egress per Weber Fire District.
Okay, so this would be emergency only, not a pull through.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tammy?
Yeah, I had a question. On a previous slide, I thought I saw a requirement that there was 100-foot setback from the stream.
Yes. Let me zoom in here. This area here, this is your 100-foot setback here. So no new structures would be allowed within this setback here. And they've got structures that look like are just outside of that. These two that are within the setback, these are existing structures. And I approached engineering. They said as long as the footprint doesn't change and these buildings are up to code, they may be able to stay. Now, there may be some additional standards based on their location within the floodplain, but they may be able to remain.
Sorry, that I'm guessing is a pickleball court, since they mentioned having that. That's
Yes.
that's not within the 100 feet?
The pickleball court is within the 100 feet. We wouldn't consider that a structure.
You
We're
don't?
talking
Okay.
vertical, yeah.
I'm assuming that goes to the legal non-conforming at that point. So then you're going to fall in the legal non-conforming.
Correct. For the existing
For the
structures, you mean?
existing structures.
Yes. Mhm.
Any other questions?
I have a question. What are the 4 structures just south of the pickleball court on the bottom of the screen? They're within the 100 foot.
Horseshoe. It looks
These
like.
here.
Is it? I can't see what it is.
The bottom left. It looks like it
Yep.
says horseshoe.
Oh, these are horseshoe pits.
Okay.
Yep, sorry.
I couldn't tell if that was.
Okay. Is the applicant here? Would the applicant like to make presentation? Okay. I think we're not required to open for public comment, but does anybody in the audience would like to make a comment? Okay. Seeing none, we won't have any. Discussion?
I guess my observation would be, I think we've probably all seen, had some concern reading some of this, knowing that this site has had what I guess I consider a pretty severe violation, dumping raw sewage into the river. They obviously have to clear that up and clear up any other violations to go forward. But I would, if this is going to be approved, there's 4 things that I would think would help the community feel better about this. One, it would be the body politic that is involved not be themselves. So there's some outside body politic that fits the requirement of the state. The second thing is that no matter what the traffic studies by the state says, I do believe there needs to be a right turn and a left turn lane there because of the type of traffic that comes through that area. It's a bit curvy there, and it's having a backup for cars coming in and out, or trucks and trailers, wouldn't be healthy, I don't think. So I would think no matter what, they should have a right and left turn lane. I think they should have parking for trailers so that we don't see trailers and large campers end up out on the road, which would be very dangerous. And the fourth is that if there comes to be a sewer system of some sort available in the area before they begin construction, greater than the 300, I believe it was 300 yards. And I would even say a half a mile from the facility that they have to hook up to it. So those 4 stipulations I would like to see, and I think that would help the community digest this better.
Vice Chair Burton, may I comment on that, please?
I was about to ask you to comment on that.
Okay. With respect to the body politic question, my recommendation would be to defer to whatever the state law would say about that, because I do not believe it would be appropriate for the Planning Commission to put a restriction on them complying with state law in a way that would be allowed, say, forming a district or something like that. If they met all the legal requirements for doing that, if that was the route they went, I think it would be hard for us to defend a decision that prevented them from doing it. I guess is kind of what I'm getting at there.
And I wonder about the same thing on the state is 300 feet.
If there is a state law for connecting to sewer, then yes, I think that would be the thing you would defer to.
I thought in our pre-meeting we said you could stipulate further than the minimum.
Okay, is the question then would be, is there credible evidence to support a need for that? And if the commission finds, excuse me, so the code says the land use authority may apply conditions of approval related to any standards in this section, provided that credible evidence exists that the application of the standard is relevant to the use and the conditions are reasonable and necessary to substantially mitigate detrimental effects of the use as specified in the standard. So if there is credible evidence that you can point to that says that is needed, then yes, that would be okay.
I would think the credible evidence would be the existence of a modern sewer system within some distance of that facility at the time they begin construction. The credible evidence is the valley expanding modern sewer system.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't happen if it wasn't credible.
Okay, and that would be a finding to include in a motion, and I'm not the one to say whether or not that's appropriate for you to do or not, but yes, you would want to put some kind of finding in a motion if you were to choose to include that.
Just to add on that, I know we've heard our county commissioners talk about with the need of putting a sewer system, the detrimental effects of, say, nitrates going into the water systems and things like that. And we're talking about putting 116 rooms right on top of a river. I would think that would add to the emphasis of, again, this is something that's further down the road, but if we do have a sewer system that is up and running and nearby, I would think that would be something we'd want to have them hook into.
Okay, and that again is a decision for the planning commission to make, and yes, and along those lines with the parking requirement, with the similar requirements, the right turn lane, things like that, I would just say if the planning commission is going to include those in a motion that is approved, it would be best as far as legal compliance to make sure that there are findings stated to support that. And as I was looking through, going back to the parking numbers, I would think if you want to ensure that the number of, and I think Commissioner Wampler, you may have been the one who asked this, if the 184 number remains, I would encourage you to put that in the motion just to make sure it is very clear, and that you're not left, or the county isn't left at some point in the future with some kind of argument over whether or not that aspect of the site plan was binding. So you may want to consider whether or not that is something you want to include in a motion, again, with findings.
Tammy, the code requirement for parking is less than the 184. Is that right?
Well, so we have a parking standards section and it addresses many uses, but it does not address a recreational lodge use for some reason. And so when we look at these, we do our best to kind of try to apply standards. In this case, the applicant was proactive and proposed 184 spots. Now, when we look at a bed and breakfast, when we look at a hotel that is one parking space for every 2 sleeping rooms, it's clear that the applicant is proposing in excess, likely the number of rooms that staff would require. But again, as stated, you can certainly adjust that number if you feel it's necessary.
So it seems like we would be in line by saying of this 184, there ought to be some trailer parking. And the finding would be, we don't want people parking on the highway. That's a safety hazard.
Or don't have trailers.
Boats, same kind.
Sure.
Okay. But we just had a UDOT traffic study done a little bit to the west down the same road. Up on
There was a part 2. Part 1 was approved by Rick. Is that what you're talking about? And we got the part 2.
Yeah, it's up on the hill to the north.
Gateway
of the
subdivision.
Estates.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. And they actually dedicated some additional right of way to UDOT.
Okay. And did UDOT do that study? Or did private people do it and
UDOT
submit
did
it?
not do the traffic study.
They don't do them.
It's submitted to UDOT for approval.
Correct.
Okay.
On that, to that point, putting in deceleration, acceleration down these, UDOT isn't like lenient. It needs it, right? They just give up that right away, or you have to Commissioner Barber's point of like requesting it. I don't know if we should. That's again, we have to get. We're telling UDOT that they have to give it away, and then they have to put it in. That's I don't know what we can do that from my work with them.
Yeah, if you wanted to include that, you want to make sure, like Cortland mentioned, you had findings that went above and beyond what UDOT would require.
I don't even. UDOT might be like, we're not taking it.
Yeah.
They don't want the acceleration or deceleration.
Correct.
There's a chance they don't want.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like we were in line in saying, yeah, trailer parking, that's appropriate. We can require some of those parking spaces be trailer. When we get into designing the highway for UDOT, we get a little out of bounds, a little bit beyond our jurisdiction. Is that correct?
I would agree with that, given that it's a state highway.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I did when you guys used to type out this amazing thing that I could just read from. It was so amazing. Okay, I recommend that we approve file number CUP 2022-14 based on the findings in the staff report. This is at address 10909 East Highway 39, Huntsville, Utah. This is for the recreational lodge. Would also like to include additional conditions with the 184 parking spaces that are on the site plan, that those stay included. I would like to also put a condition for if trailers are going to be allowed, that there's sufficient parking for those and the ability to turn around. And then also a condition that snow storage and the refuse plan is worked through with staff.
Sounds good. I'll second that.
May I ask a couple of clarifying questions, please? Sure. There were some conditions of approval listed in the staff report, and I'm not sure I heard you mention those.
Sorry, yes, those are based, that's what I was saying. They're based on the findings and conditions in the staff report in addition to, within the additional conditions I said.
I'm sorry if I missed that.
I might have mumbled my way through it, so.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval, recommendation of approval for CUP 2022-14 for the approval of a conditional use permit, 7 recreation lodges, subject to the conditions are based on the findings in the staff report, subject to the conditions set forth in the staff report, with an additional condition that the approval is subject to the 184 parking stalls being installed, and if trailer parking is going to be allowed, that it be depicted and a turnaround provided, and additionally snow storage and refuge be shown on the site plan and approved by staff. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Commissioner Barber, did you vote?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, all right. And I think Commissioner Schumann voted also. Yes. All right, the voting's unanimous. Motion passes. Okay, the next item. DDA 2022-02, consideration of an applicant-driven request to amend the development agreement between Weber County and CW Basin to acknowledge transferable development rights. This is a legislative item. And Director, would you enlighten us on what we're considering here?
You bet. Thank you, Chair. As you mentioned, a legislative item on this one, you will need to have a public hearing. After Mr. Ewart makes his presentation, they'll need to open and close the public hearing with a motion. And then after you close, you'll deliberate. On this one, you'll be making a recommendation to the legislative body, which is the county commission. You'll just be making a recommendation on this. And Mr. Ewart's going to be presenting.
Thank you. Okay, the presenter here will be Mr. Ewart. And this is an item that's been before us, just for the benefit of those that are new members. This has been before us a few times in the past. We've considered it, I think, in work sessions and also in a regular meeting. Mr. Ewart.
Thank you, commissioners. Happy to be here. So this, as mentioned, is a project to amend a development agreement. And you guys have all, well, some of the new planning commissioners, maybe not so much, but the rest of you have seen the development agreement before, at least once, if not multiple other times. And part of the question that's been presented to you in the past is, can you interpret what the development agreement says? Does it say that there are extra development rights allowed in here? And that's not what I'm asking you to do tonight. If we were just doing this based on an interpretation basis, that would be an administrative interpretation, and we'd be asking you to make an administrative decision. That's not the subject today. The subject today is a legislative decision. You guys will be acting in your capacity as a legislative advisory board to the county commission, and whatever ultimate decision the county commission makes will be a legislative decision. Okay. It's important to understand that distinction because we're not asking for any interpretation of any previous agreement. It could be all brand new. If you wanted to pass a new agreement, it'd be all brand new. Okay. I wouldn't suggest you go to ground zero though, because there is a plat that has been recorded, but there are items in the development agreement that can be added or removed. With that in mind, the basin subdivision was applied for through CW land. Probably we're looking at a couple years ago. I believe the final agreement and the rezone was adopted on January 25th, 2022, and that was by the county commission. And then subsequent months, or perhaps even a year later, the final plat was recorded. So that property is currently platted into 10 individual single-family home lots. It is it is in the FR3 zone, and that zone is part of the development agreement. The development agreement is contingent on the zone contingent on the development agreement. Prior to the property being rezoned to the FR3 zone and having this development agreement assigned to it or tied to it, the property was the CBR1 zone. CBR1 zone is a commercial valley recreation resort zone and had the possibility of allowing quite a bit more intensity of uses on the subject parcel. Only reason it's important to know that is the applicant was the one who asked to go from a more intense use of the commercial zone to a slightly less intense use of just residential. The FR3 zone on its own allows multifamily dwellings. It allows single family dwellings, it allows two family dwellings, 3 and 4 family dwellings as well. And absent a development agreement that says otherwise, they would be entitled through the FR3 zone to 64 development rights on this property. The development agreement that is currently assigned to the property, however, it has a clause in it that says that any use restriction that is applied to the property through the development agreement prevails beyond the development agreement in perpetuity as a legislative restriction. What that means is it's not set in stone. It means that in order to make a change to it, it has to go through the planning commission and the county commission under their legislative authority. The requested change today is to recognize perhaps that there are development rights still assignable to the property. Today, if the development agreement expired, and you can find this in the existing development agreement, if it expired, the restriction of the property being only developable for 10 single-family dwellings would prevail. And that's a fact. So if we were trying to make an interpretation of what that says, it says that there are only 10 lots or 10 single-family residential homes currently assigned to this property. It doesn't mean that that more weren't assigned to the property prior to the adoption of the development agreement, and it doesn't mean that the Planning Commission and the County Commission don't have the authority or ability to change the development agreement to re-recognize those development rights. They certainly could. Now, why would they? They might because there's an opportunity here that could go into funding infrastructure and street improvements at the intersection of Old Snow Basin Road and Highway 39. Why wouldn't they? Well, perhaps because the general plan says we're going to do everything we can to retire development rights. So on the one hand, you can think of the development agreement that was first tied to the property through the rezone, the FR3 zone, as the county commission making an effort to retire development rights, generally at the request of the applicant. Applicant originally asked for 13 single-family dwellings, and the county commissioners restricted them down to 10. And I think that was to try and make everybody unhappy in a manner that is compromise. That said, at the time that this development went in, the county only had the ability to ask for their proportionate share of infrastructure improvements to the intersection of Old Snow Basin Road and Highway 39. And their proportionate share wouldn't give the county enough or UDOT enough to provide for the needed improvements. In fact, the county kind of missed the boat a little bit on other projects historically approved in this area. There was a more recent project in which we had recommended through the process that that developer help contribute to infrastructure improvements at this intersection. And the commissioners, with all best intentions, felt like that should be the responsibility of UDOT. It's a UDOT right of way. They should be responsible for their own improvements. It was only after, several months after, that UDOT officials met with the county commissioners and said, that's not how this works. It works the same way it does for you guys. If you want road improvements on UDOT facilities, you've got to capture those road improvements at the time you're offering the rezone and the development approval. So that being said, we know that we probably should have gotten a little bit extra money out of a whole host of developers from some of the newer developments on Old Snow Basin Road. When I say newer, I mean last 20 years worth of developments on Old Snow Basin Road. One of the ways that the county could in the future, so UDOT has told us right now that they're not going to be putting any money into this intersection. It's not their fault that improvements are needed. It is the fault of developers, and not just developers, people who have moved into those developments. And so UDOT has put a little bit of pressure on the county commissioners to fix the problem, by whatever means that they can. So Planning Commission, you've got an opportunity tonight to make a recommendation to the county commission. My recommendation to you is to not recognize the additional development rights and in favor of the general plan's attempt to reduce the amount of development rights that are on the valley floor. That doesn't mean that that is a hard and fast recommendation. Chair Schumann has asked me in the past why some of my recommendations have a little bit of wishy-washy language and some of it are really resolute. And that's because there's a spectrum of good that comes out of each decision to be made. And sometimes there is a really good reason to make a strong recommendation one way or the other. And other times staff are a little bit more on the fence. Because there is good that can come out of this either way. For example, if UDOT continues to say we're not making improvements to this roadway, that will fall to the county at some point in time. And the county doesn't have unlimited funds to build roads. The county has to tap, unless they get funds from outside of the municipal services fund, they have to tap the municipal services fund. And frankly, despite how big your tax bills are, you're not paying enough into municipal services to have roads rebuilt. You're just not. To have them, the potholes filled, you are. But not to have whole new roads or lanes added and intersections improved. So that means that money has to come from somewhere. One of the most equitable way to do that would be to assign a special assessment tax to everyone who lives on Snow Basin Road and uses Snow Basin Road to get to their properties. But that puts an onus, a taxing onus on people who are living in that area that have been there for quite some time and have paid taxes into the municipal services fund for quite some time. And it makes it for a little bit of a harder pill to swallow, but it is an equitable pill to swallow because that's everybody's impact is causing the problem, not just these 10 lots. In fact, these 10 lots are a minority of the impact to that intersection. So on the one hand, we find a funding mechanism, which is allowing the old development rights to continue to be assigned to these properties and allowing them to be transferred, not built in place. In exchange for that transfer, having the applicant fund the intersection improvements. Okay. Now the applicant, whether it's themselves who fund it or they cause it to be funded by whoever's buying their TDRs or by others, we would want the responsibility to rest with the applicant to make sure that's done. So I've got still a little bit on the fence, but I'm leaning a little bit more towards not allowing them. That's my recommendation to you. However, if you do, there is a development agreement in the staff report that has been revised. It's their original development agreement that has additional language and some corrections in it. The document that I just handed out to you guys goes a little bit further. I had a little bit to it today where I incorporate some of Mr. Erickson's comments, as well as, let me guide you to one thing that I thought was a no-duh thing wasn't actually written in here. And so I think it's important that we get it written in here if you do choose to go in favor of the applicant's request. So if you look at page 6, got some highlighted language in there. The paragraph on 7.2 is in the version that was in your staff report. And that reads that the remaining 54 residential development rights may not be developed anywhere on the project site, but may be transferred to a qualifying parcel as provided in the code. Any such transfer shall not be used for the creation of detached single-family dwellings, but may be used for other types of dwelling units on the transfer property. The transfer notice for both sending parcels and receiving parcels shall note this restriction. We would follow the same process for the sending and receiving as we already have adopted in the form-based code. So only someone who's got property in the form-based code would be able to purchase these transferable development rights, unless it is someone who wants to make a detached accessory apartment. In those cases, they can do transferable development right. If I were in the applicant's shoes and I had an obligation to improve the intersection, I would probably make sure all of those are sold together at the highest and best price so that the most amount of money can come in to make those improvements. Then what you don't have in the staff report, but you do have in the document I just handed to you, is section 8.1 and 8.2. And they read as follows. In exchange for the allowance of transfer of development rights as provided in section 7.2 herein, developer agrees to improve or cause the improvement of the intersection of Highway 39 and Old Snow Basin Road herein called the intersection. Improvements shall be provided in compliance with the needs and requirements of both the Utah Department of Transportation and the county. 8.2 says escrow. The parties understand that the developer has remitted to the county an escrow of $87,000 specifically to contribute to the cost of the intersection. That's the applicant's proportionate share of improvements of that intersection. That's the $87,000. Contribute to the cost of the intersection. County agrees to reimburse these funds to developer after intersection improvements have been made, provided that reimbursement follows the typical infrastructure installation requirements and release of escrow including the warranty guarantee as specified in the code. So just making sure if you do go in favor of this development agreement, we want to make sure there's a clause in there that says, hey, infrastructure improvements are tied to those TDRs, don't separate them. Don't sell those TDRs one-off by one-off and not have enough money to improve that intersection. Okay, so that was the substance of the addition. I made a couple other minor tweaks to the development agreement, including the very last page, page 16. The development agreement refers to a development plan, but there wasn't one in the previous agreement. This one just makes sure that the adopted subdivision plat for this property is the development plan. Just essentially documenting what we've already approved is what we all agree to occurring. Any questions for me?
Kelly, you mentioned the retirement of these 54 development rights playing to what is the essence of the general plan. And based on what I know, and tell me if it's different, some development rights have moved around from within developers' holdings from one location to another, but there have not been retirements of development rights.
There have been some that the county has not been involved in. So the Ogden Valley Land Trust has
Right, yeah.
conservation easements.
Sure, conservation easements, but in this type of retirement. So,
Yep.
so this goes right to the heart of the general plan. So anyone who believes in the general plan and relies on the general plan and points to the general plan would want to retire these units, development units. Am I understanding that right?
Is that the question? Yeah, I would think so. It's the basis of my recommendation, but I do provide in the staff report, there's a few reasons why you might go
Sure.
the other direction in the general plan.
So with respect to that road, which is one in the summer, spring, and fall months, I actually go up there almost every day. That used to be the main road to to Snow Basin for a long, long time. And there's a right turn lane that's there today,
Yep.
but there isn't a left turn lane, right?
That's
And
correct.
That wasn't a problem, I guess, in all the years that was the only way to go to and from Snow Basin.
Right. So if you're coming from Ogden, you got a right turn lane.
Yep.
But if you're coming from Trapper's Loop,
Right.
not so much.
Okay. And so putting in a left turn lane is going to cost how much?
We don't have formal appraisals yet. We were working with our engineers to work with UDOT to get those, and they just haven't come in yet. We think we generally know the cost. In 2022 dollars, it was about $300,000, a little over $300,000.
Okay, so not a giant amount of money. You have money beyond that 87,000 in escrow for it too, you told me previously.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be more development up that road on the other side of this development in the future. So you are able, you said the county missed the boat with the previous developments, but you won't miss the boat next time necessarily when there's another opportunity up that road.
I hope not.
Okay.
We do collect impact fees.
Yeah.
And most of these homeowners in this area have paid impact fees. The challenge with impact fees is you only have 6 years to spend them.
Right.
That means you have to collect enough impact fees from growth, from a lot of people building homes,
right.
In a manner that gives you the nest egg you need to make these kinds of improvements.
Right.
And historically, from a street improvement perspective, we've never been able to collect enough to make meaningful improvements.
Yeah.
We have on trails, but not roads.
Charlie, I got a question for you. Sorry, you're good. Okay. You and I have obviously spoke quite a bit about this. I spoke to Rick, spoke to the applicant. I watched every video when it pertained to this because it just didn't feel clear to me. Because you're right, voluntarily retire, right? We want to voluntarily retire. So I was like, oh, this must be a slam dunk that somewhere the applicant had said, yeah, I'm good to go buy the 54. That's good. Let's retire those, and it's good for the valley. That would be awesome. I couldn't find it anywhere in there, so
it doesn't exist.
So the general plan doesn't want involuntary retirement but voluntary, right? So
that's a reasonable way to read that. Yeah, the applicant took their time signing this agreement. I don't think it got the original agreement. I don't think it got signed for a couple of months after the county commission approved it because they weren't quite sure if, number one, they wanted to agree to. So TDRs wasn't necessarily a discussion point at that point, but they weren't sure if they wanted to agree to a limit of 10. They thought they could do 13, but even if they had 13, if there was no restriction through a development agreement, they'd have 67 or 60, whatever, 64.
64.
It is. Yeah, which some people would say, wait a second, they've already subdivided it 10 ways and started building homes on it. In the FR3 zone, you could build townhomes. You could take any one of these homes and convert them into apartments. You could turn them into recreation lodges. There's a whole host of things you could still do under the FR3 zone. So
sure.
To your point, yeah, the applicant had a hard time signing that. They eventually did. Oh, and short-term rentals was the other problem.
But it wasn't on record stating anywhere that I couldn't find on any video because this is your recommendation to me is fairly simple. If we could find an on record somewhere, anywhere, I couldn't find that. And then one other question to you on your comment, you recommended denial. Again, loosely, right? You're just over the edge.
Right.
However, what I heard you say was, hey, that cost likely is we'll try and do a special tax. It's likely going to hit the county because we didn't require it. So it's a higher cost to those taxpayers versus it seems like, okay, you transfer this, it then bears on the applicant, does not bear on all the other people around and raise their taxes or hit the county, which then hurts the entire valley.
That's right.
Right. And so I'm trying to understand, get more clarification. You recommended denial, but then denial means
That those funds aren't available to make those improvements.
right. So I'm trying to like decipher one, the involuntary, and two, why would we put that money on all of the taxpayers when we have a solution here?
Forgive my French, damned if you don't, damned if you do is the situation I think you're in right now. Because you can approve these TDRs existing and have some reasonable infrastructure improvements to that intersection, making it safer for people who live here currently as well as who will live here in the future. But you're bringing about those 54 or so development rights back into the calculation for the full build out. So it's a give and take. It's a trade off, and that's really why, for me, it's almost sixes. I'm just over the fence because of what the general plan does say, but plenty of things in the general plan says find good ways and achievable ways to fund infrastructure or to bring about substantial advancements to the implementation of the plan, which infrastructure would be.
So Charlie, you had told me before, we had talked before in general terms about the value of a TDR and that the general plan isn't going to work if TDRs are essentially worthless or worth very little.
Right.
So would you agree that in this case, the numbers are so small that if you apply what numbers we're talking about here on a per acre basis to get to these 54 TDRs, you're looking at a number so small that you could set a precedent that works against the general plan on in a very broad way?
I don't know if I would say works against the general plan, but I would say that it would set the base value if you're looking at comparables.
And why wouldn't that work against the general plan? If you have a value floating around out there, money's changed hands on a per acre basis around $1,000, how does that not damage the TDR process going forward?
In my opinion, because of the way we're doing TDRs, trying to move from one dwelling unit per 3 acres to townhouse or condo flats, there's already disequity in that. As much as we want to protect existing landowners on the value of their transferable development rights, we also need to find benefit in protecting the developers in receiving those development rights. Otherwise, they're never going to move. And if they don't move, you're not saving open space. And so, frankly, just from my perspective, starting cheap on development rights is probably better, just to get things moving. Now, in time, you're going to get to those more expensive properties where farmers do actually have some economic value in keeping their property. And so you need to up the ante on buying those development rights.
You say starting cheap. So you mean somebody else is going to go out and sell their development right for $1,000 an acre?
Potentially, but also potentially not.
That's never happened. So
right. I think that just puts us right back into the situation that we were in prior to this. It's going to be willing buyer, willing seller at whatever the value is that the seller is willing to sell it for and the buyer is willing to buy it for.
I just want to touch really quickly because you just mentioned the point of the TDR program. It was, you made the comment of protecting or creating open space. And that wouldn't be the case in this situation.
Nope, it would not be.
Right. Okay. Just being clear on that.
So I want to make sure we're clear, though. It's not just protecting open space, but that is one of the primary objectives of the TDR program.
I'm sorry, but I was surprised at your opening statement, the way you opened this agenda item, because you very specifically told us that we are not to be interpreting the development agreement, that this is a completely separate and new kind of way to look at it. So am I clear that then, going back, not to diminish the time you spent, as I've done very similar things, but none of that matters, right? Because whether or not there was on-record discussion of relinquishing rights, according to your opening, that has nothing to do with it. Right now, what we're looking at, the way I'm hearing you, is the county made a mistake. they didn't collect enough money. People are going to be on the hook.
Yep.
So either taxes will go up essentially, which isn't great for elected officials, but so happens when you make mistakes. So you either raise some taxes and upset people, or we create this gift.
Money
that
out of nothing.
We create money out of thin air.
Yep.
And that's, from your opening statement, sounds like what you want us to decide, not whether or not they actually exist. Do we want to create something that is valuable, that will get it paid without having to create a new tax?
That's correct.
Or you don't put the left turn-in lane until eventually you collect enough.
That's accurate. You can do that, or until some pretty serious accidents happen and
Right.
UDOT chooses to do it on their own.
Correct.
Hey, I'd like to back up just a little bit. I think it helps us the more we can simplify an issue like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've been here when this thing first came up. And first of all, the development agreement we're talking about says in 7.1, the use of the project shall be limited to 10 detached single-family residential lots, period. That's all it says. It doesn't talk about the 64 or the 54. It is truly silent. Now, in the past, I recall you coming to the Planning Commission saying, you guys decide what was in the minds of the people when they made this development agreement. And I think I made the comment, the only thing we could do would be arbitrary and capricious. We just have to make it up. And that's not, we're not a court. We don't do those things. The agreement we're talking about is totally silent. So I remember a discussion with where Commissioner Johnson was present, and the issue came up. If we limit the use, if a developer has, hypothetical, 64 rights, and you tell him if he doesn't use them on this property, they evaporate, then they will be used on this property, because no developer is not going to fully use the development rights he has. So we, as a valley, may end up with inferior developments because they're all crammed together to make it work so the developer can use the rights, because the county's telling them you can't move them. And we had a work session on that, I think. And it was.
And I
determined-
disagreed then, and I do still now.
Chair Burton,
Yeah.
I think some context to that though would be, they knew at the time that they could do 4 homes or 3 homes, townhomes and those things. Well, never mind. I'm sorry. The county commissioners pushed them to 10. They submitted for 13. So they weren't building the 60, but they were pushed to 13, or
Okay.
they recommended 13. So they did know, without any discussion in the planning, the development agreement, that they were going to hold those units. So I think I apologize. My point is just that they did choose to do 13, and then we're limited to 10.
Okay. The question is, what happened to the other 54? So we can't just pull, where's the finding that supports, well, they evaporated or something? Everybody has a different opinion. So let's look at the facts. We start out in a staff report saying that the Planning Commission on September 27, 2022, tabled a decision because the third-party purchaser did not have land to which the rights could be lawfully transferred. I went back and I read the minutes. And what really happened was, let me give you a little bit of background, especially for those people that are new. The atmosphere at that time, and the minutes reflect, there's been an expectation that landowners will have the right to transfer unused development rights, even though there may not be a formal ordinance identifying sending and receiving areas, because back at this time there wasn't an ordinance.
Right.
But there had been discussion since 2016. Yeah, if you don't use them here, you can move them around, and we're going to move them around for different reasons. Okay. Let's see, Commissioner Burton stated he feels that the intent of the TDR concept is density neutrality. There are so many development rights in the valley, and those should not be exceeded, but also not reversed. If the transfer is denied, which would essentially be the elimination of development rights, he worries about a claim of the county taking those rights. Certainly the rights can be banked, but if they are never allowed to be used, they'll be lost or taken. Mr. Grover clarified in this case the applicant is seeking an amendment to the development agreement, which was approved in order for a rezone. He feels there should have been more specificity in the development agreement regarding the total number of development rights on the property, but that was not the case. Further, Commissioner Burton stated he spoke with the Utah Property Rights Ombudsman today regarding this issue, and the Property Rights Ombudsman assured him there's a great deal of case law on this type of matter and legislative matters that have ultimately been litigated. There are constraints on the county that are created by local, state, federal laws, and one of those constraints relates to a property taking action. The Ombudsman referred to the development rights as an economic benefit associated with the property, and that should not be taken away from the property owner. He stated that those rights should be not eliminated just because no one thought to reference them in the original development agreement for the property. There was Commissioner Burton suggested a finding supporting a positive recommendation of the development agreement. Amendment could be that the original development agreement did not preclude nor include the idea of banking development rights, simply silent. It's a hard question for the county commission to decide upon, and the planning commission is being asked to make a recommendation to the county commission based on this information. They should decide if they want to eliminate the density on the property or allow it to exist. This is back in 2022. We've got the same question today. Okay. What happened in that meeting? Commissioner Burton moved to, let's see. Yeah. Page is stapled wrong. The first motion, Commissioner Burton moved forward a motion recommending to the county commission regarding this application, amended development agreement to allow the development of the transfer of development rights from CW Basin property to other properties in Ogden Valley based upon the following findings. The proposal is in the public interest because it will result in the intersection improvements along Old Snow Basin Road. The proposal complies with the general plan by allowing the owner to bank units and build them in areas that the county deems appropriate in the future. The county commission decreased the build density in this village by limiting potential development on this piece to 10 units because this area was deemed unsuitable for village type density. The only other area to be developed in this village is 1.7 acres across the street, which cannot currently support village type density. Therefore, the remaining units should be transferred outside the village and built where the county codes allow it. The proposed amendment is consistent with the general plan implementation 1.1.1, which states Weber County will support transfer of existing development rights as the primary means to increase densities in suitable project areas while proportionally decreasing density in other areas. If the once existing and still remaining 54 development rights are extinguished, this would be inconsistent with finding number 3 above. The densities may be moved around the valley to promote better development in the valley area whole. Okay, this motion was seconded and had 3 votes. There were 6 commissioners present. 3 voted aye, 3 voted nay. The motion failed. There was an alternate motion made by Commissioner Wampner to move forward with a negative recommendation to the County Commission regarding the application. The Planning Commission feels that the development units expired with the original rezone and the number of development rights associated with the property were reduced to 10. That was seconded. There was a vote, 3-3. That motion failed. Commissioner Burton moved to table action on this application, the amended development agreement to allow the transfer of development rights from CW to other properties, and encourage planning staff to consult with the State of Utah Property Rights Ombudsman to seek guidance on how to address this issue. Commissioner Montgomery offered a friendly amendment that the action on this application be scheduled for a time after action is taken on a formal TDR ordinance for the valley. This motion carried 6-0. So it wasn't that there was another property there. It was the two motions failed, approval, denial. And there was concern about the county getting sued because of a taking action as warned against by the private property ombudsman. So look at, here we are today again. The 64 development rights are based off a density of 20 units per acre in the FR3. It's important to note these development rights have been included in each build-out calculation for the valley. So we're not increasing anything, we're not decreasing anything if we recognize these rights.
Correct.
We're density neutral. Question at hand is whether the restriction limited the developer's ability to transfer the 54 rights. The agreement is silent. Okay, here we go. Land use goal 1. Weber County is to reduce the overall amount and impact of future land development in the valley planning area. There are two components to this. One is use principle 1.1 talks about transferring development rights. Land use, 1.1.1, transfer development rights. The next one is I think it's 1.1.2, talks about voluntary transfers. So we can move them as part of this. Let's make the valley better because we're going to move them to where they're more suitable. Let's reduce development by encouraging voluntary means. Okay? Voluntary means, land trust, other such things that you just recited have been done. That's been the history. There's no history of just saying, poof, your rights just evaporated against your will. Okay. There is a value to be gained by donating to a land trust, a significant tax deduction. The fact that no such donation was expressly made that would qualify for a tax deduction evidences that no such donation was intended. We're trying to figure out what was in the minds of these people. Did somebody just give away a huge tax deduction? I don't think so. I think they were focused on something else, not the evaporation of their huge tax deduction. The agreement's simply silent. Voluntary does not mean ex post facto taking advantage of a citizen landowner, especially when the atmosphere at that time was TDRs. Everybody was looking forward to them. A proper finding could be improvements to Highway 39 and Old Snow Basin Road may very well be deemed an important action supported by this transportation goal.
I'm glad that you have added the idea of this win-win in the development agreement, the possible revised development agreement. Win-wins are really good things.
I like them.
Yeah. But I don't see any rule that says rights shouldn't be sent outside the village. That's part of your staff report. If this area is intended to be a residential village, then development rights should not be sent outside the village.
Yeah, that's inside of the form-based zone, which is intended to govern these village areas. We just
The form-based zone, but that came along a lot later.
That's right.
Yeah. So at the time, yeah, you can transfer these things around. And so
You couldn't make any transfers at the
you
time.
couldn't make the transfers, but in everybody's mind, we're talking about transfers. Therefore, let's get a TDR ordinance.
There was certainly a lot of speculation about transfers at the time.
Yeah. So I just think the idea of going back and saying, well, they only used 10 of them, therefore the others evaporated, is inconsistent with the general plan. If they're going to be evaporated, then that's up to the landowner, the owner of the rights, to say, I voluntarily give these things up. Then he gets a tax deduction. The fact that everything is silent, nobody was just talking about it. Okay. That's the history that I've been looking at today.
Excuse me, let me try to wrap my head around this.
Please.
Okay. The development agreement, the TDRs were transferred into this piece of property.
Not transferred in, no. So the rights on the property existed by virtue of the zone.
Were 64.
64, yep.
Right.
You got it.
Then the developer signed a development agreement that said it's 10.
Yeah, voluntarily signed.
Voluntarily signed that.
Yep.
At the time that the developer signed that agreement, never requested, never mentioned, never said that he wanted to move the other 54.
Correct.
So now the developer's coming back and wanting to go back and amend or come up with a new agreement to address those 54 development rights that he didn't address when he signed the agreement.
That's correct. And I think the reason why
Okay,
is...
thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I think the reason why is because at the time we didn't have a TDR ordinance, so there was nowhere for them to send them, so it was completely out of their mind. Within a few months, we had a TDR ordinance, and within a few months, they were back asking the question.
So a lot of this is, that's what you just did is speculation. And again, I'm going to try to refer back because you surprised me, but you specifically spoke the way you spoke on purpose with how you opened this agenda item. You said you don't want us to try to get in the minds and try to figure out what happened and what's actually in there and what exists and doesn't. You said specifically we shouldn't do that. Again, I'm shocked that you did that, but that's what you're asking. And I want to make sure that we are clear on what you're asking us to do. Because in the past, as Commissioner Burton mentioned, we had been asked to try to figure out if they existed. And you're saying you don't want us to do that right now.
I'm saying you don't need to. I think it's irrelevant. And the reason it's irrelevant is this is a legislative decision. You guys have the ability to make new rules. The county commission, well, you guys have the ability to recommend new rules. The county commission has the ability to adopt new rules. And if the commission ultimately decides that they want to recognize the 54 rights that aren't here anymore, they can. But that would be by legislative action, not by interpretation of an administrative document.
So it would not be giving any indication on whether or not they exist, past or present. They are creating 54 because that is what they choose to do under the legislative. That's what you're saying right now.
Correct. And does the benefit of doing that outweigh the cost of doing it?
So
That's the question I want you
So
guys to answer.
if it's the question you're asking right now, rather than what we were asked in the past, why 54?
Because the FR3 zone would result in 54.
So then you are basing it off of,
Nope, just basing off the zone.
okay.
The zone by itself, not any action or decision that's been made in the past. So 64, but they've got 10 here.
Okay.
So the question is, accept the 50, you can accept the 54, the amended development agreement, 54, there's a way to pay for all the improvements. We decide not to accept it and the 54 retire or whatever the number is, because we don't care about the number anymore, right?
Yeah.
We're being asked not to consider it, but yeah, and then that's stuck, that bill is stuck with the county, potentially the neighbors. and potentially the valley, or just the entire county. Right?
And I wanted to ask that too.
That's what I'm understanding.
Right.
Too.
Yep,
But
that's
you
it.
mentioned when you said the county will have this bill and the municipality budget line item, blah, 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 but you said, and it would equitably be put to that neighborhood. What is the history of the county? Like, haven't we paid for improvements over in, far
the-
west or somewhere else?
No,
I've never.
Not these kinds of improvements. So the county in the Ogden Valley and out in Western Weber in the unincorporated area, the kind of improvements that make these kind of improvements would be from the Municipal Services Fund. And there's frankly not enough tax being garnered from the Municipal Services Fund. And I mentioned this to Commissioner Barber over email the other day. Compare your 3% municipal services tax to my 23% Ogden City tax. So Ogden City is collecting enough funds, hopefully, to try and make some of these kinds of improvements. The county is collecting enough tax to make maintenance decisions. If you're going beyond maintenance, if you're going to expansion, at that point, the county commissioners are going to have to figure out how to tap different funding sources.
Can I make a comment, Commissioner Burton?
Yes, sir.
So some of the questions, so I had some misunderstanding with this, but some of the questions that I would ask and kind of put in the minds and ask Charlie is the amounts that we're talking about. So based on the questions you've asked, from what I've heard just now, is we're talking about 213,000. We'll get there sometime, but $213,000 above is really what the county could be responsible for. Maybe more, because that was in 2022 dollars, which is only a year or two. And yes, prices are up, but I mean, even at a 30% or 10% increase, that's $230,000. But I know that there's other subdivisions that have money set aside as well. So I guess if we're asking just, should we do this now? How much are we giving up these rights for? Is a question I would ask.
Yeah, it's a great question. And if you're asking from a cost per right, is that what you're asking?
Sure.
I couldn't tell you. I think Commissioner Barber did the math on that a little while back. It was a couple grand per development, right?
In that range, if you take it down to an acre, which is the way landowners will think, it's around $1,000, maybe a little less per acre.
Well, so you've got the CW land that had 10 homes and assessed 87,000. There's at least one other one that I'm familiar with that should have been assessed in that shorter time period. And there's probably another, because there's been a lot of development that have some assessment on it. Maybe not on all of them and enough, but there has to be some sizable amount that's not that. I mean, if 10's getting 87, there's one that's quite a bit more than that probably has 100,000. I guess that's the question for Charlie.
Yep, it's a good question. At the end of the day, it's a more complicated answer than I don't want to overcomplicate it. So let's just keep it simple. At the end of the day, is the money in the account to make the improvements or not? And I can tell you right now, they're not in the account to make the improvements.
I want to be really the market needs to determine what the market needs to be. Are we going to tell Carlos and Harley that they need to charge for burger? Right? It's like the market needs to do what the market needs to do. They're going to trade for lot values. 5 years ago are not what they're trading for today. The market does what demand will drive that. We shouldn't be trying to be like, oh, we're not going to do that because we don't like the TDR price today. I don't believe that's.
I think you misunderstand my point there, Commissioner Johnson. My point isn't that I'm trying to set pricing on transferable development rights. My point is, if the question's asked, should these be created, all things forgotten in the past, should these be created to pay for this? The question then becomes, well, what value am I getting for creating it, and what sacrifice is the community having to make by having those in? So if we're saying, for example, just throwing out numbers, that all we're raising is, $54,000. That's the gap that we're trying to fill to
Gotcha.
make this work. Is $54,000 in the eyes of the community worth that extra density? And I'll call it extra only because we're being asked to look at it as today and not looking at the past. So is that worth, 54 more units than what would be built? That's my point, not necessarily trying to set any pricing or have anything to do with that. It's just, what am I getting for what am I giving up?
I understand that. Thanks.
Cost benefit.
And the other key
analysis.
point is, if the developer who intends to receive these doesn't get these 54 units, that developer is going to have to go out and buy them on the open market or get them somewhere else, and very likely will have to pay more, which I think makes the process work better. Charlie disagrees with me, but
No, I think on
neither of
that,
us
in
are
that respect, very much agree with you.
common economic professors, but it just seems like the developer is going to get a windfall. You get 54 development rights for a tiny amount of money. My gosh, what a gift. That is a gift. If this gets ratified by the county commission, they might as well just write them a check, because that's what it amounts to.
Okay, I think I think we're ignoring the idea that these 54 rights belong to the developer.
No, they don't.
Because
Look,
they don't.
They don't.
And he
This-
asked us not
They
to,
don't.
not to even consider that.
Well,
The county,
I'm not concerned with what Charlie asked us to do. I'm concerned with what I heard from the private property ombudsman and the takings clause and getting the county sued for taking away these development rights.
Cortland, would
That's
you
what
like to
I'm
weigh in
concerned
on
about.
taking?
The developer voluntarily signed the agreement.
But
to limit it to 10.
the agreement is silent as to the other 54 rights.
and
It's
it's-
perfectly silent.
It's
That's
unfortunate.
the problem.
It's unfortunate,
It's
but you
not-
yourself mentioned that everybody was thinking about TDRs at this time.
But-
And it was silent, not just from the county, which is very unfortunate for the county. They needed to tighten that up, which hopefully they have. But for the applicant at the time, it's unfortunate. But in my mind, which is clearly very different than yours, it goes to demonstrate that all he was interested in doing was the plan that he had. And even right now, again, I know we're not supposed to be considering this, but even right now, what we're hearing is that he's looking for an acknowledgement of these potential development rights so that he can literally give them away. Not that he wants to develop them, because he doesn't want to be on the foot for a bill. So it reinforces in my mind that he wasn't thinking, I want to bank these, because he wanted to build 13 units at the time, which then went to 10.
He could build the 13, he's still got 1.3 acres that he could use these rights on.
I think, but in the light of discrepancy, Commissioner Wampley brought up a really good point. There's a discrepancy. How does the county fall when it's not clear in the agreement? I guess I'll lean to Portland. Where does it typically go? What do you lean towards, the county or towards the applicant?
So you're talking about interpreting an existing agreement?
Yes, and there's discrepancy in this case. There's a discrepancy on silence. I'm not asking you to interpret this application.
Right.
I'm just saying.
I think
in general.
that's
There's a
unfair.
discrepancy.
I think that's
What would we
unfair
have to do?
because
That's
this
your
is a
question.
legislative item. That's unfair to ask attorneys because it's a legislative item, puts Cortland in a rough position.
I think that's probably what Cortland would have answered with.
So what I can say is, if there is an existing statute or ordinance that does not clearly restrict some kind of use of the land, then the state legislature has said that is a situation where it has to be interpreted in favor of the landowner. So it's possible that the same principle would apply if we were in a situation where we were interpreting an existing development agreement and taking what it says and applying it to an application for development. For instance, if CW the Basin were in front of you with its existing agreement and the Planning Commission had to interpret that application for a subdivision or a land use permit or something based on the existing development agreement, And if there were a lack of clarity, then maybe that principle would apply where we would have to interpret it in favor of the landowner. But I agree, that's not the situation we're dealing with tonight. So.
Fair. And I'm understanding that.
You guys have said it's silent. It is not silent. It says 10. It says 10. They didn't ask to put the remainder in abeyance until the TDR code was completed. Doesn't say anything like that. It says 10. There was a negotiation. The county did give them something. It gave them the right to build those 10 big houses on teeny tiny lots. They did not have that right. They won that right in a negotiation. It says 10. That's what it says. But they gave up the rest in the negotiation because it doesn't say that they put them in abeyance or they were going to hold them until the TDR code was done. They're gone per this because it says 10.
See that?
And they did win the right to do something. They did not have the right to build on that lot without commercial, big giant houses on tiny little lots. They couldn't have done that without the negotiation they freely entered into and agreed on the number 10. So it's not silent, in my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Contracts
offer?
require consideration. You're talking about tit for tat in the contract. You give me this, I'll give you that.
Exactly
And
what
that has
happened.
to be recited in the contract, and it's essential terms of the contract. If it's not there, then the contract can be voided. Okay?
Can I
It's
offer an
detrimental
observation?
reliance. So if the contract is silent as to what, as to including the giving up of 54 development rights, then they're probably not part of the consideration. It wasn't part of the deal. You can't have it both ways.
Can I offer an observation? This should have a public hearing, so we need to open a public hearing, close it, and then at that time we can continue on with any commission debate. Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. I think we're aware of how we feel.
Yes.
Trying to refine things here and trying to keep the county out of trouble. Okay, we would like a motion to open for a public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open public hearing.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, if anyone from the public is here, would like to speak, let's go with those in the audience here first, and then we'll go to Zoom. If you'd state your name, your address.
Hello, my name is Kevin Irwin. I'm at 6378 East Quail Lane. For this, I've been following this development for a long time because I'm a neighbor to it. From the TDRs, you've established an economic value for the TDRs as part of this discussion. So my question then becomes, are you going to assess every property now that has a TDR at some particular value and tax it from that standpoint because you've established an economic value? Secondly, with that is, how far back are people going to be able to look? As you've brought up, TDRs will be silent in basically any development agreement up until this point in time. And so that means anybody going back in time should be able to open up and be able to get those TDRs that they've given up or those development rights back in time if they haven't developed all of those properties. In which case, then you're flooding the market with development rights, in which case you're driving the value down to zero. So those are the 2 points that I like to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is James Bird, live at 1052 Meadowlark Lane. God, I'm tired of this project. This is ridiculous. TDRs on it. First of all, my history with this goes way back to when they first filed, back in 2021, I guess, or February of 2021. All the way through until John Lewis came up with the idea that, hey, I know a way to pay for the intersection, because they were being asked, John Lewis and CW Land being asked to kick in X amount of money along with the county to do the intersection. Why? Because to quote Commissioner Jenkins way back on May 3rd, 22nd, we took the position we weren't going to do anything about the intersection and walked away from it. And that was a problem because our community, the Chalets, kept saying, this is an inadequate road. Please do something about the intersection. And they chose not to. Okay, 64 TDRs. Where did that magically come up to? And I think Commissioner Burton keeps going back to history. Let's go back to the history. Back in about 2008, that property was a CV2. The owner of that project requested from the commissioners to have that as CV1 to build a hotel. Now, to build a hotel that would be 64 units does require water. That's a whole other issue. Okay. In the stipulation, which the county has, the commissioners at that time said, you can have the right to have this as CV1 to build a hotel. But if you do not do it, you have 18 months. I think that was the time. And it goes back to an FR3. The county never signed, or the county signed it, the commissioner signed that, but for some reason it magically disappeared. I brought it up to the county when this whole thing was starting. And they chose, I think I can say safely that you told them, the commissioners, that they had their choice. They could either support what the previous commissioner said and have an FR3, which is one house, by the way, or they could go with the CV1. They chose to go with the CV1, which I thought was a horrible negotiation process. Okay. Along this line, that was a 64-unit hotel that the developer wanted to do. We wind that all the way up to now. A 64-unit hotel probably could not be built on that because of water. Both the sewer company and Lakeview Water was very clear that they would not provide any more water than for the 13 units. And even with that, they even put a stipulation, they reduced the size of the plumbing going into those units because of the water. Okay. The 64, then Commissioner Farrar comes up just not too long ago and said, we have TDRs because of vertical space, not land space, which is true. You could build up to 50 feet. The escapes across the street, did they forego their TDRs because they did not build 50 feet higher? Can they come back on you and say, hey, we want now to save these 50 or these, let's see, they're at 35 feet, whatever, how many units? We want those TDRs we want to make. How far are you going to go back, like Mr. Irwin said, to validate? Now, let's go to the finances of this, which is ridiculous, as a number of people have said. So Mr. Lewis, at the time, you need the date, I think it was May 9th, the cost of the intersection was supposed to be $320,000. Mr. Lewis said he would pay his $140,000. The basin was supposed to pay $80,000, and the county said they would pay $100,000. Mr. Lewis was the one who said, wait a second, I have a real strong suggestion. And he brought up the whole 54 TDRs coming up. I will buy those 54 TDRs for the cost of bailing the county out of their $100,000 and CW Basin out of their $80,000. Now, if you look at that and you do the math, that comes pretty poor. That means the basin, the seller of the TDRs, is only going to get approximately $1,600 for a TDR, which is pretty darn low if you ask any farmer to sell their TDRs. Okay. I also, again, like Mr. Or Commissioner Farrar's statement about that, as he said, airspace. They're selling airspace. I would like to see anywhere in any TDRs that, hey, we're going to sell airspace. And by the way, some of these houses have already been sold. Maybe they want to retain their airspace above their house. I don't know. It's a little kind of ridiculous. Did CW Land go in knowingly for just 10 units? Yes. Their objection, why they were holding out, I suggest, was because they wanted to do STRs. And they kept pushing the STRs. They first denied it before this commission in, I think it was late February 2001. And that time, a commissioner said, I think that your plans, because of the size of these homes, you're going to do STRs. At that time, the person representing the basin said, well, that would be up to the property owners. Well, as it went on, what CW Land started realizing is that they're going to be denied. So then they wanted to go back to the commercial zone and build their 13 houses with TDRs with 107 parking stalls. I mean, this thing is just way out of line for a 3.2 acre piece of property. The bottom line to me is that my taxes have gone up 10% a year. I guarantee West Weber has not. And if the county can't find the money to build a road that is inadequate right now for people trying to get out of, in case of emergency, of Old Snow Basin Road, and people turning in from Highway 39, both of a safety issue. If that, what they're thinking is, okay, we'll save $100,000, it's pretty sad. And I don't think any farmer is going to want to sell for $1,600 on that. Thank you for your time, and I hope you deny this ridiculous idea.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jan Fulmer. I live at 3741 Red Hawk Circle in Eden, and welcome to the new two Commissioners. God bless you for what you're doing and the time you will be spending, okay? All right. Number one, the development agreement was agreed to. It was signed back in late 2022 between CW and the county commissioners. The developer, CW, agreed to rezone it from commercial, knowing full well there were development units there that went with the commercial property, to go to what I believe was FR3 or something like that. The CW developer does not reside in Weber County. And I'm betting my last buck on the fact that they never knew about an Ogden Valley general plan. They never knew about TDRs. They never knew about zoning and the fact that you can only do short-term rentals if you're zoned a certain way. And I think they came into this thinking we're going to just do this development and not realizing what was set up in Weber County. They are outside of the county, and I don't think they were familiar at all and did not do their homework before they came in to wanted to do this development. It was signed, sealed, and delivered, and they have several of those homes already built on this parcel. That's number one. Number two, if this development agreement is amended, how many more are we going to go back and look at and amend? It opens the door for that to happen. Number three, there have been multiple discussions by Weber County commissioners on these so-called development units. And I won't repeat what Jim Bird just said, but the deal that was struck by another developer in the valley who came up, I believe, with the idea, well, let's go back and see if we can mend this. And then I'll use those development units, I'll take them, and then I'll pay for the county's portion to do the road improvements and this other thing. So what was happening here was all of a sudden we have TDR coins. We came up with another monetary system that we would use TDRs for. That is not what TDRs were intended to be used for. Not to be used to do other services that needed to be done. As far as the county not having enough money to do this, I'm very sorry. What I want to present with each of you was a financial report for the Upper Valley that we got from the Treasurer's Office in April 2022. It was the revenue versus expenses for the Upper Valley, which is Ogden Valley. And we provided Weber County with a $1 million surplus. I don't know where that money was reallocated. I don't know how they reallocate funds, how they decide where this money goes, and I don't pretend to. But I'm going to tell you, you have to look at this very seriously because boy, there certainly was a surplus in 2021 and we had quite a bit of snow that year. So I'd like to give you a copy of this. This came from the treasurer's office. It's very detailed. And you know, if you have questions on it, you can go directly to Scott Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you want one? Okay.
I forgot to mention, we request comments be held to about 3 minutes.
I'm David Carver, 2439 North Highway 166 in Eden. I totally am in agreement with all the public comment. The TDRs I thought was a type of cryptocurrency when I first heard it for quite a while. And the more I understand about it, the more I think it is a cryptocurrency. It's created out of nothing. And I just think you need to be very careful, not move ahead on this. And thank you so much for your time and welcome the new commissioners. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Anybody on Zoom would like to make a comment?
Yes, I'm Jack Hartman. I'm at 6484 East Summit Cove. So I look out my back door at this development. If they didn't ask for the rights years ago, I'm an attorney and I was in government for 20 years in Illinois, Chicago, Illinois. I've never seen anything like this where we would give them something that they didn't ask for at the time they wanted to use it. They made their deal. They made the deal for 10. I think they should stay at 10. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Kay Hoagland. I'd like to make a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Go
thank
ahead.
you. Kay Hoagland, I too am an attorney. I live in Eden, in Wolf Creek. A few observations, one from a fair market, free market perspective, the second from legal perspective. Number one, to make TDRs work, we have to have an open market. This was not an open market discussion. No one else was given an opportunity to look at this. So what you've got is kind of a funny money, a made up deal that no one else was given an opportunity to participate in. Second, it's a principle of law that, negotiators and parties are presumed to come to the table as knowing, presumed knowledgeable, presumed this person, this entity had their lawyers. The negotiations went back and forth, and it's just bad law to go back and redo a deal for parties, whether it's redoing it to benefit CD land or redoing it to benefit the county's coffers. That's not the way contracting or agreements should work. I reiterate what has already been mentioned. If you redo this deal and create new rights, who else is going to come stand in line? It was known that TDRs were there. They were coming in the valley. We only lacked an ordinance to deal with it. And so I think the developers should be charged with the information and knowledge that everyone else had. They struck their deal. They shouldn't be allowed to come back and make it. And finally, my view is this seems to be a deal designed to make good. I won't use the word cover up, but make good on some mistakes that were made by the developer, by the county along the way, the county didn't press enough on how this intersection was to be paid for. The developer didn't press anything about the TDRs. And it seems as though this is a windfall by the creation of another developer who is very facile with understanding TDRs. This seems to be like a windfall to get a couple of parties out of a mistake and create a windfall for the third party. I'd say, own up, as I'm hearing here, to mistakes were made, and mistakes have a price, and it may be we all have to help pay for that intersection. But I think it's a bigger price to pay that we don't want to see, to start fabricating TDRs and in distorting the use to which they should be put under the Valley Plan. So thank you very much. And I hope you deny this proposal to recreate or create new TDRs.
Thank you. Anyone else online? We can't see the screen. Do you see anybody else raising a hand? Okay, it appears no one else is online with a comment. I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 It looks like I'm one of the ones that made an error because I rushed into the public hearing without giving the applicant the opportunity to speak. So please come speak.
Chase Freebairn, representing CW Land. Commissioners, thank you. To the new commissioners, welcome. Appreciate Charles, as always, in his staff reports. Very detailed, among some of the best, most detailed staff reports you will get from a county staff, by the way. And I think whether Charles agrees with us or not on certain applications, he's always done a great job. I think you guys have great staff who's super helpful. But I won't belie the point. I know everyone is anxious to, hear the Planning Commission's decision on this and see what recommendation. We do have the right to come back here and ask the county a question. It's not a popular question. That's fine. But the American flag that sits on that stand gives us the right to come and ask a land use question before the land use body. And that's fine. And I can't speak for the past. Frankly, I wasn't even working at CW when a lot of this happened. I wasn't in the room. Sounds like Mr. Burton and others were, Cortland, others involved in the process were involved in this process, years ago. And frankly, I was not here. I don't know. I can't speak for my predecessor as to why they weren't more specific in the development agreement at the time. I think there was some oversight both on the developer side at the time and the county. And I think we would all agree that if we could go back in time and clarify things in a better way, we would. But I don't have a time machine. I don't have that luxury. But we certainly have the right to come back here and ask before the Planning Commission and ultimately the County Commission to make a legislative act and to amend a development agreement. Development agreements are amended all the time. It's nothing new. I've amended several myself and projects over the years. If there's something that's not quite up to par or there's something that wasn't quite clear, it's not how I would prefer to do business the first way. If we could get a development agreement right 100% of the time on the first time. But, we live in the real world and there are adjustments, there are changes. And frankly, I think there is a win-win here. I think there is a way for, absolutely, there's a windfall for the developer. Absolutely, there's a profit motive. And that's nothing we are ashamed of as a developer. And that's nothing that the other developer is ashamed of either. And nobody in this room should penalize us for having a profit motive. That's what makes, development work, and none of us would live in a home, and none of us would, it's the free market system we live in. And I understand that, we have a right to petition the county. And frankly, I think, like I said, if we could go back in time and do it differently, we could. But there's been a lot of talk about, oh, well, how come it wasn't done this way and that way? And the TDR ordinance didn't even exist at the time. I mean, there was no legal vehicle for us to even write in about TDRs. It didn't exist. The ordinance wasn't written. And I sure wish it would have been sooner before that time, but it wasn't. And now it is. And if we can come back to the county in good faith and petition the county for some TDRs that we can transfer to another receiving site, to another developer who's willing to pay for county improvements on a sorely needed improved road. I think everybody in this room, if there's one thing we can agree on, it's that Old Snow Basin and the highway there, it's a mess. It should be fixed. I think for public safety, I think in a way to do this without involving taxpayer dollars, this is an easy fix. And you, as the land use authority, have the ability to amend the development agreement and accomplish a goal which will check a box for the county for financing. It'll check a box for safety and traffic. And obviously there's other parties that have benefits as well. And we're not ashamed of that. I think if everyone can walk away with a win, I don't see why you wouldn't make a positive recommendation to the county commission to amend the development agreement. But again, I don't want to belay the point. We'll let sleeping dogs lie. And I appreciate public's comments. There's been a lot of good comments. And again, I think if there's one thing we can all agree on is that intersection is in sore need of repair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question.
Any commissioners
I have a
have
question.
questions
Sure.
of the applicant?
So you said the intersection's a mess, it's dangerous. Why are you trying to sell homes to people on such a dangerous intersection? Why didn't your company step up on day one and make sure that that road was safe so that your customers could live in a safe place?
I mean, why didn't the county help petition a mechanism to do so? How come UDOT didn't do this years ago or didn't input themselves? I mean, it's completely speculative to go back and say, hey, and again, I wasn't here. This was before my time, so I can't speak for, things that didn't happen under my watch. But at that time, I'm sure it would have been nice to have said, hey, we should have had more foresight and more planning and more thoughtfulness. I don't know if there was a traffic study done. There's a lot of things I don't know about that time and that application, but it's a great question. But ultimately, I think, I mean, we can't wait forever for infrastructure to be perfected before people can live in homes. I mean, people need to live in homes and in development.
So your development company could, in fact, do the improvement, put in the extra money, and then with the agreement from the county that you'll pay back as they collect additional money, and then that would allow you to sell safer homes.
Well, and
that happens. I know that's happening with the sewer over Eden. So you could do that if you.
Well, and in a way, we already have. We've set aside. I think Charles mentioned $87,000 in bond amount that we've bonded for those future improvements. So we already have put up cash in the county coffers that's sitting there right now that can go towards some of those improvements. But what this does is this gets us across the finish line versus that's the Band-Aid. That's a nickel in the jar, and that's great, the 87,000. But this gets us all the way there, and it gets the intersection complete.
But you could go ahead and do the whole thing if you really wanted to make it safe today. You could, just like the sewer is being overbuilt in Eden with the developer going to be paid back. So you could do it. Thank you.
So, and I just want to clarify, since you were discussing the money. So I heard that the county commissioners proposed that it be split between the three, that I think it was the legacy developer would do, I forget, 140. You guys were 80 and the county was 100. Is that correct?
I think that was the original.
And did you agree for the 80? So are we only discussing the 100,000 for the county, or the 80's already agreed to and put in?
Well, we've already written a check for $87,000. It's already sitting in the county.
And we know the developer from Legacy has agreed to pay that smaller share. And so really, we're only talking about 100,000 for the county. Is that correct?
What's the bond for then? Their proportional share to repair that intersection.
So when we're looking at administrative approvals, which a subdivision is an administrative approval, we can only, the word is exaction, that we can only exact from the developer exactly what their, well, exactly what their rough proportionate share of their impact on that, on the community is. And if we can make a reasonable argument to say their rough proportional share is X amount of dollars because they're putting impact on the roads or on, can't do maintenance, it's got to be their proportionate share of detrimental effect on levels of service. So we can, through road studies, prove that the 10 lots they're putting in has X amount of detrimental effect. In my opinion, if we were looking at the total effect of all of those homes up there, 87,000 is probably on the high side of their investment. But that is what they chose to invest and allow to be invested, because the other side of this is the county could say, you know, this is an unsafe intersection. We can't approve your development until it's fixed. We're not going to make you fix it. We just can't approve your development until it's fixed. And it's a tough spot. And so when we're looking at this, 87,000 was the calculation that our engineers came up with on their proportionate share. They've got a new subdivision compared to the other new subdivision that was in the area, and their proportionate share. So, and I believe at the time the county was talking about putting in $100,000, but that all changed when the other developer mentioned that, hey, if we got a TDR deal going on, he'll put in the improvements. We'll use 87,000 of the escrowed amount plus whatever the difference is from the other developer.
Good, thank you.
So have you been collecting from, I mean, there are hundreds of homes up there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been collecting from all of them?
Impact
Proportionate
fees.
share?
Impact fees, yes, through impact fees. However, keep in mind, impact fees are very tightly regulated by the state. We have to spend impact fees within 6 years, and we have to have specific improvements pre-scheduled. So we have to make an impact fee facilities plan that says, these are the improvements, these are the system improvements that we're going to be doing with this 6-year amount of impact fees, or that 6-year amount of impact fees.
Has that been done?
Yes, if we don't collect enough impact fees to be able to afford to spend on those specific projects, the projects just don't happen. At which point we're subject to forfeiture of those impact fees. The developer can ask for them back.
Okay. So help me with bottom line. How much have you collected from all these other developers going toward this intersection?
Zero. My understanding is that this intersection is not on the impact fee facilities plan.
Okay. So if their proportionate share is 87,000, you've collected zero from anybody else. The county's got to pay the difference.
Possibly.
Or create a special taxing district to all those homes that are on that road and have them pay their proportionate share.
Yeah, or look for grants or find other funding mechanisms. They're not easy to find.
Okay.
They're there.
And I heard the number 300 and something thousand is the total cost of putting that in.
That was the estimation in 2022.
Okay. Would you expect that's less now or greater?
It always goes down, right? Now, UDOT gave us an estimate of about 500 and something thousand. The other party at hand here said that their estimated cost would be about 320. So my guess is if UDOT were to turn around and make these improvements, we'd be looking at probably closer to maybe 600,000 or 700,000.
Okay. And the other party you're talking about is this TDR thing.
Yes.
Okay. So without the TDR thing, the county's potentially on the hook for 5 something to 600,000 less 87,000.
Potentially.
Can I just clarify? I don't understand why, if there were, at the same time, the legacy development went in, and that was the other developer that the county was talking to, right? And they agreed at the time for their third, and these guys apparently agreed and put up the money in a bond for their third. Why is there nothing? I'm confused on how there's nothing collected when at least there's 87.
Oh, okay. I thought the question was how much have we collected from other owners in the area through impact
Okay,
fees?
but
That's where I
so
thought the
has
question was.
the legacy also put up money
I do believe that
the way
would be-
that this CW Basin did?
My understanding is, no, they did not to this intersection. Now, that was, okay, so when you're doing exactions, you have to nail down that exaction before you make the approval. After you've made the approval, you've taken the bond for whatever improvements they're going to put in and given them their subdivision plat, you can't go back and say, oh, we didn't take enough. You need to give us more. And where this intersection wasn't part of the consideration for legacy, that there wasn't any bond money put towards this intersection. Now, that's not for lack of desire or effort from that developer. My understanding was that developer was willing to put the money in, but there was a misunderstanding, I think, at the commission level that this is a UDOT right of way. UDOT needs to be responsible for UDOT stuff. So there's where we kind of missed the boat. We realized the mistake within 6 months. In fact, I remember one of our engineers got a little bit of a mouthful from one of our commissioners at the time, and it was a little comical because it was the commissioner who said, we don't need to do this. So he realized his mistake at the time too. Is what it is.
Charlie, when was this intersection identified as a project that needed to be repaired or replaced?
On the impact fee list, it has not officially been. It is now, however, in our new draft impact fee list. So if that gets adopted within, should be within the next few months that street impact fee facilities plan gets adopted, then we can use impact fee dollars from the entire Ogden Valley to help make improvements to this intersection or that intersection or that intersection. But right now we can't because it's not in the existing impact fee plan.
Thank you. Do we have any history on, I live in that valley. Do we have any history on accidents in this area? I've never seen an accident there.
I'm sure we do. I'm sure we can get it from UDOT. UDOT actually keeps tabs on those, and there's some public sourcing information on the internet that we can.
Then I had a question for the developer. Okay, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I heard you say that your intention was to take these TDRs and to sell them to somebody else, and that other business, whoever you're going to sell them to, was then going to go ahead and make the improvements in the road.
Correct. Either
All right,
either
all
physically
right.
make them
So
or
as a business, obviously you've done, you understand how much money you're going to make for this. So my question is, how much are you planning to sell these TDRs to the developer where you have an agreement for to make the improvements?
Well, the only incentive we have to sell these TDRs to this other developer is then we get our $87,000 in bond released.
Well, that didn't answer my question. My question was, obviously, if you're looking to sell these TDRs to another developer, I know your bond is $87,000. How much are you intending to sell these TDRs to the other developer?
We have yet to come to terms on an exact amount, but whatever the improvements are divided by 54, that's the amount, right? It's not like we're pocketing something or there's another developer who's taking a cut. This goes straight from party A to party B in a development agreement, and it's based on a certain number based on what the improvements cost to build that intersection.
So as far as CW goes, what I've heard you tell me is that there's no money exchange. You're just basically giving it to them. They make the improvements and you get your bond back. Is that what you're telling me?
Whether it's done physically with the other developer B actually performing the work, or whether he's writing a check to the county for those improvements. There is money exchanged. It's not like it's just all monopoly money.
Well, no, but your TDRs, you'd be making an arrangement that essentially what you're doing is being relieved and getting your bond back.
Correct. That's our incentive. That's the whole reason we're here. It's like, well, what's in it for CW to recognize our 54 development rights? Well, we have $87,000 that's going to sit there in perpetuity until that intersection is improved.
Right.
Therein lies our profit motive, which is fine, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's the benefit of party A. Party B, the other developer, he gets development rights that he can take to his village and complement his development. And the county, party C, gets an intersection improvement that they otherwise probably wouldn't have for a long time.
Right.
And at no cost to the taxpayers.
So, but going back to the idea that we're not trying to divine the original agreement and all of this, including what you had said when you came up, which is the past is the past. We have the right to come in and ask for an amendment.
Sure.
We're not arguing what happened in the past. We're just asking for this now. That's what I heard you say.
Sure.
So why 54? Like, how about 20? Can 20 get you your 87 back? Can 3 from 13 to 10? Can that get you your 87 back? If it can, is that cool with you?
Yeah, it's not a question necessarily I can answer. I mean, the other receiving party that receives and is buying the TDRs, that would have to make financial sense for them, and I can't speak for them. So if the number is 54 or 50 or 20 or 10, I don't know. I don't know what the threshold is where it becomes, you know, a no deal for them. I don't know.
Right.
I can't speak for them. It's a great question, but honestly, it's a question only they can answer.
Right. But, and as you're not selling them to them, because otherwise you'd know if I wanted to actually sell 10 and keep 43 or 44.
Well, that would be the point of the agreement is this would all be spelled out in an agreement line by line, who's getting what, where, why, and how much.
Right.
And so it's not like it's willy-nilly.
No, but from what I understand from what's been written, as Commissioner Burton mentioned, this has come to us over the last 2 years. And what's repeatedly been written has been essentially that the proposal is that one developer will take on the full cost, absolve the county of any of their liability in return for the 54. So there really hasn't been a negotiation based on like, well, what if we want to take, we'll sell you 10, but keep these and get the tax break from the land trust. There's been none of that. It's just been a trade.
Yeah, and that's why we're here.
Right.
Is
Exactly.
to
That is
have
why
that-
you're here.
Is to
Yes.
have that conversation. So correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we're down to 2 scenarios. One is CW keeps its 87 in the pot and the county pays 513,000 to get this, assuming the UDOT 600,000. Who knows? But we'll use that as a hypothetical.
Actually, can I ask a question about that? Yeah. You've like at least twice you've mentioned that you have 6 years once you make some sort of an assessment to use it. Although you then just recently said you haven't even declared an impact assessment. I don't know the words you used, but basically something about how it hasn't even been filed yet as an impact improvement site.
Yes.
When does this bond expire?
So an impact fee and a bond for construction improvements are 2 very separate things.
Okay.
I mean, they're still money though. So the bond it's an escrow that the developer has put up for 87,000 goes towards ensuring that some kind of improvements at the intersection are made. As soon as the developer has made those improvements to the tune of $87,000, the county gives that money back. So in other words, the developer is responsible for $87,000.
The developer CW Basin.
Under the bond agreement that we
Yes.
have right now. Oh, my understanding is CW, being the developer, is looking to do a deal with another developer where 100% of those intersection improvements are done. And if that's
Right.
the case, question over here was, well, what does that mean on a per TDR basis? If that's a $400,000 fix, it's about $7,400 per TDR. If you're looking at $400,000 divided by 54.
But there's still an opportunity. I mean, the math right now is saying the county has $87,000 and you put it on a 6-year plan. So as additional developments come on the old Snow Basin Road, you can go ahead and during the next 6 years, go ahead and have those additional developments, put in money to make those improvements. So it's not necessarily a decision to say, if we deny it, the county's on hook for $500,000. That's not true, because we have the opportunity as we go forward with additional developments to have them pay for that improvement. Is that correct?
In theory, and let me explain why it's a harder answer than I think you're going to want to have. We cannot hold the developer's money indefinitely. In fact, we can only hold the developer's money for a certain period of time, and it's less than 6 years. If it's escrow money that the developer provides to the county, it goes to the end of that contract, and then they get their money back.
So, sorry, that's what my question was to you. When is that?
It'll be a year after improvements are made.
So until improvements.
Well, if there's not enough money to make complete improvements, there's not enough money at all, right? And so at some point in time, the county will have to give that $87,000 back for lack of using it. I don't know what that time frame is, but I do know it'll have to happen. Now, let's just pretend for a second we can hold their $87,000 indefinitely until we've got enough money in the kitty to make improvements. This is a per building permit basis. So John creates a building, and then Andrew creates a building, and then Frank creates a building, and I don't, two of them are girls, so I don't want to be gender specific on that. We're collecting it a little bit at a time, incrementally. It never at a rate enough that we've got a nest egg to do all the improvements. And so unless we're just looking to put paint on the ground per year, we're never going to have enough money to make those improvements. It's a matter of making sure we've got, in this case, $400,000, if that's the cost of that intersection, at one time, as opposed to waiting 10 years to actually get to that $400,000 threshold, or waiting 6 years, because that would be with the impact fees. So incremental increases in funding doesn't work for a number of reasons. You're never going to have that enough money at the same time. And once you get to 6 years, the money you collected on year one isn't anywhere near what it was worth.
But the bond does not expire, correct?
The bond will expire, and it goes with a subdivision improvements agreement. And I don't know what the time frame on their subdivision improvements agreement is. I'd have to look that up. And I can do that and get back to you guys on that. As soon as that time frame expires, that money goes back to the developer. Okay. The county has in its coffers a lot of money from other developers who never asked for that money back. It just takes a developer to come in and ask for it, and we have to give it back if it's expired. So there's a limited ability from a financial perspective for us to have enough money in the bucket to do these improvements. That's why it's one of the reasons why a lot of cities don't use impact fees anymore. They just choose not to. It's too hard. They're doing it through taxes, and they're doing it through Class B and C road funds and whatever else it is. It's just the legislature has put so many rules on it that it's too challenging to do.
Charlie, is there a specific plan for the intersection? I don't see. I see it says that the intersection of Highway 39 and Old Stone Basin Road is in need of improvements. What does that actually mean?
So I think I've seen a drawing of the plan, but I'm just gonna have to explain it to you because we don't have it with us. It includes specifically UDOT needs a left-hand turn lane from Highway 39
east to west.
Yep. So as you're heading facing towards Ogden, turning into this road, there's a left-hand turn lane. Specifically, the county would like to see at least a right-hand turn lane coming out of it. And one of the reasons why the county would like to see a right-hand turn lane coming out of Old Snow Basin Road is because we would really like to incentivize travel to the east to pick up Highway 167, Trappers Loop Road, and funnel as many people that way as we can to 84 as opposed to down the canyon. And that's a general plan principle.
So I think just sitting here, kind of my head's spinning a little bit. This isn't a raging crazy intersection. It's not even on your plan. You know, yeah, a left-hand turn lane would be nice. A right-hand turn lane isn't gonna, I don't think, cause somebody to go over Trappers versus through the canyon. They're gonna go which way they want to go. If there's a right-hand turn lane, so what? I come out of that road, as I said before, almost every day, spring, summer, and fall. I go both directions. There's way more dangerous places in the valley for left-hand turns and right-hand turns. It's not even on your radar. So we're sitting here thinking, we're trying to have people think this is some raging, crazy dangerous intersection. Yeah, having turn lanes is great. And someday, hopefully they do. They didn't have it when it was Snow Basin's primary access point. They don't today. It's not on your plan. So painting it in a way that it isn't, I find frustrating. And if it was on, so crazy dangerous, it would be on somebody's written, documented plan with drawings and numbers and all sorts of real things, but it isn't. So let's try not to make it something it isn't.
I want to make sure I was clear. The new plan that should be adopted within the next few months does have it on there.
Well, that's in the few months. If it was a raging crazy place, it would have been done the last time a plan, or it'd be higher on the priority. I'm sorry, but I'm just sitting here listening to all this, driving that road all the time, and it would be great to fix it, but it isn't the worst intersection in the valley. I can tell you that.
Okay, so
Can we proceed?
I think you're telling us that the idea of collecting money today for a improvement that will be made in 5 or 10 years doesn't make any sense, because you never get there from here because of inflation.
Unless we had enough money today to fix the intersection
So,
today.
so there is
Sure.
an advantage to fixing something completely right now, and then it's done.
Yes.
And as I read the change you made to the development agreement, it said the developer will fix it. Will pay the cost, whatever it is.
Yes.
Okay. When would you, if this went through and this revised language were in place, when would you think that improvement would be made?
I couldn't tell you right now. That'd be a question for our engineering division. I can tell you it'll be before their $87,000 is reimbursed. So they've got some financial motivation to make sure it's done sooner than later.
Now, the person that's going to come up with the money, the developer, maybe through somebody else, is going to be on the hook for the total cost, whatever that is. That cost keeps going up every month.
It seems like every minute as we talk about it in this meeting.
Yeah. So it would seem to be in their best interest, if we're going to do this, we want to put this thing in right now. So right now could be, I mean, you can't give us an exact time, within a year, within 2 years, or are we still talking 10 years?
Actually, I think that's a really reasonable question, something the existing draft of the agreement doesn't address. Probably a better question for the applicant, but if I had my druthers, I'd say this year.
How fast could it be put in?
It could be done this year.
This year?
This year, yeah, by the end of summer.
Okay.
A lot of speculation. The person who'd be paying needs to be the one that confirms that that's something they're able to do.
Physically speaking, it could be done this year. From a financial perspective, again, that's a question for the applicant and his partners.
Okay. So if there were an inclination to approve this revised agreement, and it were on a condition that, yes, this thing works, if it is put in this year, that could accelerate things and get the problem taken care of.
I think so. It'll at the very least give the county commissioners an understanding of a sense of urgency from the planning commission.
Otherwise, the other option seems to be, I mean, costs keep going up. We're hearing 500,000, 600,000. The county's going to have to look at a special taxing district for all the people that use this intersection going up the hill.
Or
I mean,
ignore the
that's
problem.
one of the options they have if they want to put in.
Yep.
Either today or in the future.
Yep, one of the options at their disposal.
Okay. So the advantage of, I don't know if it's example A or B is we get it done this year. It's a win for the developer. He gets his 87 back. It's a win for whoever's financing the whole deal. He gets his development rights. We're not increasing density in the valley. And it's a win for the county because they're off the hook.
Sure.
Okay.
I think there's some major losses for the valley in that win, potential win, whole lot of loss, which some of the public brought up. I think we're looking at, number one, I don't think there's just an A and a B, because at this point it's not density neutral, because even as the applicant mentioned, he's not discussing what happened years ago. He's asking for this now separately. So right now, we'd be adding 54 back to the valley. However you feel like it was before, he's not arguing what the original contract was supposed to read as. He's asking for this amendment today. So we're talking about creating 54 density rights, putting them into the valley, and then we're setting them at a price because it's not on the open market. None of us are being allowed to buy them. No other developer who also might want to put them in a form-based zone is being allowed to bid on them. So we're setting them at the cost of whatever this road improvement is.
Well, maybe he could sell them to you for a lot more.
Entirely possible. My point being that we're looking at, when we have discussed TDRs, people have repeatedly mentioned the market has to set the price of the market. This is not an open market scenario. This is a deal between two entities, closed doors. Nobody else is involved. I don't even think he even considered the tax break when you mentioned it. So, I mean, it's not, they were looking for their 87 back, but there's more. So it opens us up. It sets a precedent. Like the other people in the audience had said, how far back are we going to start to amend agreements? So you have that come up. You have, let's see, there's questions of airspace because why 54? Why not 3? They originally asked for 13, now they have 10. Why not 3? Why 54? Does that then reintroduce this? Well, there's airspace. Well, how many other people have airspace? Are the tax assessments going to change for everybody who has development rights on property that are not being sold or developed? And they're currently being taxed at a high rate. Now the price is $1,600. I want a tax rebate. When it comes down to it, what I see is our elected officials were remiss. They made some mistakes. This is a very easy way to not have to pay for mistakes, either because you have to then get people mad and assess them a higher tax or a special assessment, especially in an election year, whatever. But it just is what it is. There was a mistake made. We're going to have to pay for it. Special assessments get made. I don't think it's A and B because we're not held to 54. It can be anything we choose, or it's nothing, and we got to pay it another way. We pay it down the road. Somebody else comes up. There are other ways to skin this cat. I think this is a lot of loss for the valley for potentially $400,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but when somebody's already agreed to 140 and someone else already has 87, it's really not that much money.
Let's go back to the general plan 2016. There was a count made of all the development rights, some finite number.
Yes.
And this 54 was included in that finite number.
I agree with you.
Okay. So if we approve this, we wouldn't be increasing beyond that finite number. So point one. Point two, the general plan says we encourage these things to be moved around. It also says we encourage there to be the total number to be decreased from that finite number, but through voluntary basis, not magic.
I understand. I argue that this was voluntarily done.
So if there's another win there then to the county not having to face potential litigation over a taking.
It does, but the litigation's going to cost more than the 87 anyway.
Hypothetical.
They voluntarily signed
They
the
did.
agreement.
Can we try to make a motion here and see where it goes, please?
Oh, wait a minute. I call for the motion. Is there any other comment? Anybody, Commissioner, like to make a comment?
I just want to say this one thing because it's something that came up when the agreement was made with the 10 homes. I remember attending a community gathering discussing this specific development issue. And the residents that lived in that neighborhood were furious and they were very, very vocal. And I remember, I was not on the commission at the time, but I remember saying to them, but don't forget, they dropped density. So the valley has gotten something good out of them allowing 10 homes on this postage stamp of property, which yes, bothers you and I'm sorry, but the valley overall got a gift out of this. The commission gave them something and took something and it's a compromise. And right now, what we're talking about doing is just really, I don't want to use that term. So taking from the valley and those residents specifically with no give back, no benefit that was originally the benefit. Now we're just saying, we're going to remove that benefit. And it's all just a difficult situation. So I just feel bad because I did argue this was actually a silver lining, but now the silver lining may potentially go away.
Okay, final comment from me. I think you've opened my eyes a little bit on this involve the market, because as I do the calculation here, if the total cost 600,000, that's 11,000 per unit. 600,000. Well, we don't. If it's 513,000, it's 9,500. Anybody's willing to, the market can come in and say, hey, I understand you got a deal. I'm going to up I'll give you 15,000. That's the market. If somebody wants them more than some other guy, okay, that's the way the market works. So we're not cutting it out of the market. It's not a closed market. We're really opening it up. So that's my final comment. Nobody has any other, I will call for a motion.
I'd like to motion to move that we deny file ZDA 202202, an applicant-driven request to amend the development agreement between Weber County and CW the Basin to acknowledge transferable development rights at property located at 94-7 East Old Snow Basin Road, Huntsville. The findings in the staff report are the basis for this. The proposal is not adequately supported by the general plan. The proposal is not supported by the general public. That is my motion.
I don't do shorthand.
So I read exactly what was here. So you can, if you just read what was, this is what the county wrote in the motion to deny. So I just read what the county wrote.
Okay, and the second was by?
So discussion, Chair, is that what you said?
I got to read the motion.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Barber to deny the applicant's request based upon the findings in the staff report, and for a finding that the proposal is not consistent with the general plan, and an additional finding that the public is against it. I assume the public is those that spoke tonight, or that's your motion?
Correct, that's the motion.
Okay.
The motion is the exact motion proposed by the county.
Okay, and that's been seconded by Commissioner Possenbach. Okay, discussion?
You've all actually, I came into this, I did a bunch of research and I came in really in favor of the applicant, right? You guys have actually opened my eyes up, if I'm going to be honest with you. I do believe it was a market because I do deals like this quite often that still could be called open market. But what I do feel though is some of the considerations and thoughts really do, the precedence scares me. And so I think there's ways to do this that, and I think some of us just have difference of belief, and that's okay. Some of us want to stick it on the applicant for not specifying, and I'm in the belief that I believe the county should be held a little bit more liable than the applicant here, because I believe that when I call the planners, I expect the planners to help me understand these things. I do applications, this is what I do, and I expect the county to help me out with this. I try to be as knowing and as studious as I can. So look, I think just a straight denial, in my opinion. I actually like your opinion, Commissioner Rompler. I could rather table and say, one, because it doesn't set precedence when you create a unique deal for this deal. That's not precedence, that's consideration on something different. So I like it saying, does it have to be 54? Can it be something different? So why I struggle with this, I think I've been convinced, but at the same time, straight denial, I think the county should be held somewhat, they weren't as clear either as well. So that's my.
agree. For discussion, I wonder, so the proposal that's on the table is to deny and for the findings that are in the report. We only have what's being proposed to vote on. So I don't know that we could vote on other arrangements. So just based on the motion that's on the table, I would be concerned that these findings are not specific enough. We have denied things in the past based on not supported by the public, not supported by the general plan. And I don't know that they are as strong a reason going up the chain as I really think this causes a lot of problems with the way it's written. So yes, I think we should deny this specific proposal. And maybe we need to specify some more reasons why. I don't know if I start labeling some things, if I get a sticky wicket. So I'm a little bit nervous to do that, but I'm worried that just going on not supported by the general plan, not supported by the public, isn't going to convey to the county. The way it's written is very problematic. So I don't know if someone can advise.
What do you mean, what is written?
The way that this specific agreement, I think, is written.
You lost me. Do you
Oh.
think that the motion is not specific or
Well, the motion is
agreement
to
not
deny. It's the findings that I'm nervous about are too vague.
So the staff recommendation was quite extensive. So by saying the staff recommendation, that's essentially saying everything that was written in those multiple paragraphs that led to the county's summary statement to not support this as written.
And I'm open to you guys saying you think that that is strong enough. I'm just concerned because I know that Charlie, he even admitted that he got a little bit wishy-washy. Here's some reasons not to, here's some reasons to. And so I'm worried that we need to be pretty specific. And maybe we don't, I don't know.
I think there is specificity within here. I can tell you that in my 1 year of experience, which is as long as some of the others here, I've seen things, a finding by this commission go back to the elected commission and get presented and spun in all sorts of ways. So I assume that may happen here as well. No matter what is said I can tell you that when we voted to deny the Eden Crossing last item that was before us, there were some really specific things put into that motion, and those were totally ignored 100% when it went back or when it went to the next level. So sure, we could put anything we want in here. I think embedded in here is all sorts of stuff.
I hear you. Okay.
But I have no confidence unless one or more of us go and at the point this is further discussed, add to it live and in person, then I don't know what difference making more written statements will make.
Commissioners, just to be clear, the written record, your motion with the written record is given to the commissioners every single time.
Yeah.
And so it may not be discussed in work session or out loud, but the commissioners get exactly what you guys give them. So please feel free to put more context into it.
So Commissioner Wamner, are you suggesting like the finding that this proposal doesn't meet is not consistent with the general plan? Are you suggesting maybe why? What part of the general plan? Something that somebody can latch onto to say, oh, it doesn't meet this part of the general plan rather than the entire general plan?
I mean, we could, if that is in here. So I can see that is specified in here. The land use, codes, numbers and whatnot are in here. I was thinking a bit more in terms of some of the concerns I have about how much of a cost or a negativity can come out of passing it the way that it's written, in terms of it opens up all of these quandaries about, are we now dealing in airspace? Are we allowing a non-open bid. I'm not sure, maybe it's not closed door, but a private arrangement that is set by something that has nothing,
Commissioner Wampler, if
Yes.
you don't mind.
No, I'm
I
fumbling.
agree
Go
with
ahead.
you I think if I can summarize what you're concerned is, one of the major concerns that we have is that if this goes through or any is approved as it's created, right, as we add more, you're worried that the commissioners won't hear the major concern that maybe is not spelled out very well in the report, that other development agreements could be reopened. And so I think there's a recommendation. My recommendation to you would be maybe to say just that as a question of friendly amendment to the motion, that can we add some specificity to our concern that this could open us up to more development agreements. Being asked of that question is, can I use the 100 that I have because I'm only 30 feet instead of 50 feet? I think that would be my recommendation, is to look at bringing that to ask for that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you. So if it were to be a friendly amendment, this is me thinking out loud here, I would want to put in, yes, I'm concerned about the reopening of past agreements. I'm not sure if we need to specify things, past agreements of not having utilized all of your development rights, or your airspace, as well as I'm concerned about the tax assessment argument. I think that's a very fair argument for residents to make. And the county, if they're already looking for some money and revenue, are going to be looking for a lot more when people decrease their tax assessment. I think this opens a can of worms. So it's very simple. I'd like to just be able to deny this application as it's written, but and maybe that's something I need to just attend the county commission meeting and say, here are my specific concerns. And maybe that'll just make that easier.
I agree with a lot you said, Commissioner Wampler. And my concern, and excuse my ignorance as a new guy, is we've been tasked to determine if the TDRs existing on the property were either reserved and banked or if they were forfeited. But in the agreement with the county, it was not stated. And so we're required to determine that, which puts a lot of weight on us and does open a can of worms if the resolution does pass. And my concern is, I don't know how we vote on this properly to not get the county into a situation for litigation possibilities, or for us to just arbitrarily make a decision that we don't have enough information to understand. And that's my concern, that we're tasked to do something that I don't know there's an absolute black and white response to this.
We've heard a lot about, the agreement being bad, the agreement not being specific, right? That agreement got written. Lawyers for the development, lawyers for the county read that agreement, right? Okay, everyone signed that agreement, okay? The agreement said 10, okay? So it was 10. It wasn't 64, okay? It wasn't 10 now, 54 later, okay? It was an agreement. Both parties signed it. No one held a gun to anyone's head.
I'll even add that it is 10 because the applicant even said, we're not arguing we're asking for a new agreement, basically. We're asking for an amendment. We're not arguing the old agreement. We're talking about a new thing. And I think there's lots of ways it could go, but as far as this specific application of 54 development rights in exchange basically for the road getting fixed, I guess just up and down, for me, it would be a no, because there's so many other ways that can happen. And the way it's written, I think adds more negatives than it does positives for the Ogden Valley.
Okay. Anybody want to make a friendly amendment to the motion? Okay. So we have, let's call for a vote.
So, and we're voting on the motion that was to deny.
Motion to deny based on the findings that
In the
were,
report.
in the report and because the public's against it.
Aye.
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 Commissioner Schumann,
Aye.
nay. Okay, the motion carries, vote of 5-2. Okay, thank you for all your participation in discussing this. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And as you recall, we are making a recommendation to the county commission. They decide. They're elected by the public. They make the decisions. We're there to help them by giving them information and recommendations. So I have never felt bad because the county commission didn't follow my recommendation. And I don't think that's healthy for us to feel that way. Okay. We're now to public comment for items not on the agenda. Anybody like to make such a comment?
Yes, Commissioners, I'm Jan Fulmer, 3741 Red Hawk Circle, Eden. This is not on the agenda, but I want to express a sincere thank you to all of you and all the previous Ogden Valley Commissioners. At one time, you were elected and you had the absolute authority to make a decision. That changed, and your ability right now is only to recommend. I know how much time you have put in on many issues, and I know how frustrating it is when you're really not paid attention to and simply overruled. And that is frustrating for the whole valley also. But I sincerely thank you for all your time and effort.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we'll move to remarks from the planning commissioners.
Yeah, I have three comments, and I'll keep it real short. And I think all of these need further discussion, but certainly not tonight. So last year, about a year ago, I suggested that the Ogden Valley General Plan be updated because a lot has changed, new information and so forth. I was told more than once that's not going to happen, but I was told the numbers initially that were put in the report with respect to projections and such would be updated. So I hope that can happen. It's been a year now. And I do hope an update will happen because there are a lot of things have happened. The county has spent money on studies, and I think that plan needs to be updated. And I hope the county commissioners don't continue to say, well, the West Weber report or plan took 18 years. Well, that's irrelevant, that if it took 18 years. There's a lot going on in the Ogden Valley, and I hope the general plan does get updated. And that leads into infrastructure leadership. And I received some good information from Charlie just today, based on my request to learn a little bit if there has been or is more infrastructure leadership going on that I'm aware of. And maybe that term is debatable. I mean, with respect to sewer and water infrastructure valley-wide. I'm not going to say any more about it right now, but I hope this planning commission can weigh in on that, and I hope what work has been done with by the county can be brought more out into the public domain, and there can be a development plan, so to speak, that comes forward that gets worked off of into the future. And the last thing is I recently took a quick look at the Powder Mountain and Snow Basin development plans. After the CW Basin one came up, I decided to look at some of the bigger ones. And the Snow Basin one in, I think it was 2021 or 22, actually was revised, negotiated revision. What's interesting in that development plan is that a hotel room requires 1/3 of a building right, which is also true for Powder Mountain. And in certain areas at at Snow Basin, they require one development right per 5,000 feet of commercial space. That doesn't exist in the valley. I've asked the question previously on this. I never had an answer other than it doesn't exist. Well, why does it exist up in the ski resorts where it really hardly matters with respect to density and all the other issues, but it doesn't exist on the valley floor? Was it an oversight? Was it a manipulation? I don't know. And so I would hope that over the next short period of time, in some way, and I don't know the way things like this get looked at, but I would hope it could be looked at. Because I think if it's good enough for those development agreements, really with respect to hotel requirements, and certainly commercial is important too, that the valley floor have that same potential impact that I believe would go to the core of the general plan.
Thank
Those are
you.
my comments. Thank you.
I have one comment, and that is that, and this is for the planning office. In tonight's packet, it's the second time in recent history where recreational lodges have come up, and it's entirely possible that this will kind of continue to come up. And in both of those situations, we have discovered that that there are no development standards in this particular ordinance. Specifically in the things that have come up, one was about parking and the other one now tonight was about how many lodges in general, how many buildings can be put on what size property. I think that's a pretty big omission that we I would very much like for us to pull the recreational lodge code and see where we can tighten that up. Because at least recently we've had a couple of people utilizing that ordinance, and I think it needs to be revised.
Thank you. Planning Director report.
Yeah, I'll take those comments back to the commission and then they make that determination. They look at our work schedule and staff level, and then we can get back with you.
Hey, remarks from council.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Nothing. Last item, vote on chair and vice chair for 2024. This is a one-year appointment. The county rules prohibit a chair from serving more than 2 consecutive terms. Chair Schuman is just completing 2 terms, so he's ineligible to serve. So I'm going to call for nominations for chair first, and I nominate Commissioner Johnson. I think Commissioner Johnson has been on the commission the longest, other than Commissioner Schuman and I, has more experience, and make that nomination.
I'll second it.
I'll second that. I'll third that.
Any other nominations? Okay. All in favor of Commissioner Johnson being our new chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Did he
Aye.
accept, by the way? Yeah, I was gonna say, does he accept the nomination?
You
Whether
probably
you
need
do
to
or not,
vote.
we just said yes.
Been voted in, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
If I say yeah, no, aye.
Okay. I see the weight of hundreds of pounds settling on his shoulders. Okay.
How you feeling, Commissioner Schuman?
Okay. Accept nominations for vice chair for 2024.
I'll nominate. Done a great job in the past, and would love that. Keep that advice.
So is the only term limit specification on the chair?
That's what I understand.
Is that correct?
No, the vice chair is also covered by that. The ordinance says that applies to each officer serving not longer than 2 consecutive years for the chair and vice chair.
Okay. So how long have I been serving?
You were just last year.
Oh, well,
Okay.
I would support that even more.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought you were 2 years, okay.
Thank you. I would have changed, yeah, but I stay with mine.
Almost
Any
certain.
other
Let me just double
nominations for
check.
vice?
I'll look in here real quick.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear who was nominated.
Commissioner Burton. But we're checking to see if he's done 1 or 2 terms before we go any further.
You know, it doesn't have it in here, so we can get back with you.
I think
yeah,
you've been
Trevor?
doing it as long as I have, actually.
Okay. Then we probably need
Yeah,
to
I
look at
think it
another
was 2
option.
years for Burton, for Commissioner Burton.
Okay. We need another nomination.
Commissioner Wampler?
I appreciate that. I'm still traveling back and forth, and I believe these 2 chair positions have to meet with the commission regularly.
They meet with staff the week before, and we look at the agenda and go over that.
And if that has to be in person, that would be, I'm happy to accept, but in this very short term, I wouldn't be able to do the duties properly in the next, say, 2 or 3 months. So in that respect, I'm happy to nominate, whether he is or not, Commissioner Barber. Would you accept if nominated?
So that meeting,
Yes, yeah, it's in person. It's on Thursday at 12 o'clock before.
I can't hear. I'm sorry.
when I make a commitment, I like to say that I will be there every single time, and I have never missed a meeting. But Thursday at noon, telephonically, I could probably do if I can't do it in person, but I can't say that every single Thursday at noon I can be there.
We could always change the time to.
No, I mean, just during the day, and I don't want to make that commitment if I can't be there, if I can't do it over the phone, then I don't want to be absent.
Okay. We have on Western Weber, we have switched the chair and vice chair. That's always could be an option.
So I guess this is
Oh, so you're saying we
point of order.
You could have
Commissioner Schuman.
Trevor.
We could do Commissioner Schuman as vice chair.
chair.
Oh, but that could, yes, chair. His chair experience, so then.
Yeah.
He's already been doing it.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll nominate Commissioner Schuman then for vice chair.
Any other nominations? So on Commissioner Barber, I think you're declining the nomination.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, all in favor of Commissioner Schuman being vice chair?
Hey, can I make a friendly amendment?
Yeah, that's right.
My friendly
Because-
amendment is if Commissioner Burton can't do it, then I will accept. But if he can, then he needs to do it. He's better at it than I am.
Okay, can we check on that?
We could check, yeah.
Okay, so can we all vote in that friendly amendment? Commissioner Burton takes primary. If that can't happen, then Commissioner Schuman will take the vice chair position. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Got it.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn. Yes. Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice job, Commissioner Burton.
But in the meantime,